Yeah, exactly. And so I came out here and thought I was being all Portlandy and kitschy and what.
how are we all doing this evening? Hope we're all doing well. I forgot to eat my lunch earlier. My dinner even earlier, sorry. So you're going to have to deal with me eating dinner and doing some React Andy for the start. But I've brought up a video about Plan B from Politics Live. What's happened to my thing there? I'm not going to let that be there. Not that. Not it. What's happened to my camera? Please bear with us, everyone. Da, da, da. For the love of God. Right, there we go. It's actually working now. Bloody hell. It's also the wrong way around, so I'll fix that. There we go. Much better. So yeah, I'm gonna let me just bring up this. Swap these round. Get them on the right monitors. Yeah, we're gonna start off today's stream. We're gonna be watching Politics Live from a couple of days ago. First talking about like the new restrictions and then the votes that were gonna happen with regards to that. So it should be a bit of an interesting watch, and I'm gonna have to eat my dinner at the same time as I'm very hungry. But I did need to at least do some streaming before I stop for Christmas. I've been putting off far too long. We're gonna get that sorted. Let's go. I'm gonna pop this into 1.25 speed, and we shall fire away. This is the one we want. Where's my camera gone? There we go. Actually have a camera source now. Well, let's go.
It's Tuesday, it's 12:15, and we're live in Westminster. Joining me, Conservative MP and Chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, SNP Deputy Westminster Leader, Kirsten Oswald, Times radio presenter, Ayesha Hazarika, and the editor of The Spectator, Fraser Nelson. Today...
Does the Prime Minister have the support of the party, Minister?
Boris Johnson faces the biggest rebellion of his premiership.
Governments love taking powers. They're not that keen on releasing them, as far as I've seen.
Labour will vote with the government.
We will always support measures designed to protect public health. That includes the measures in Plan B.
But this restaurateur tells us Omicron is already costing her tens of thousands in lost bookings. And are our human rights laws British enough?
We can strengthen our tradition of liberty, but add some common sense, and that's what our plan will achieve.
So, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, said only a couple of weeks ago that this Christmas will be considerably better than last Christmas. In brief, Tobias, will it?
Well, we need to get behind the Prime Minister's grand plan, which is to make sure we get through this latest mutation. There's some aspects of that are concerned. That'll come up today as the vote. But absolutely, it's good to see people listening to that message. You see the queues outside St Thomas's and other parts of the country, people wanting to get that third jab. That's how we're going to get through this latest mutation. But the details on the passports itself, you just heard there from somebody in the industry. I represent Bournemouth. We've got a big tourism operation there. They're scratching their heads how it can be that you can walk in with a negative lateral flow test or that sort of dog-eared certification that says you have 2 jabs that was completed 6 months ago.
You're voting
that doesn't make
you're
sense.
voting against that bit this afternoon.
That particular section, but absolutely with the Prime Minister on the wider scheme of things to get us through Plan B.
Right. Ayesha, do you think it'll be a better Christmas this year than last?
I don't know is the answer. If you look at the statistics from the National Health and Security Agency, they're now looking at, they're saying 200,000 cases a day and that growing exponentially. We know from the experts that this is highly, highly transmissible. The question is we just don't really know at the moment. We all hope that we can have a better Christmas than last year. Last year I spent Christmas by myself. Many people had a terrible time over Christmas last year. But I think for many of us, there's strong feelings of déjà vu.
Kirsten, I'm going to show our viewers this in the Times. COVID in Scotland. We must limit mixing sturgeon to tell families. We are expecting further restrictions from the First Minister being announced later on today. Deputy First Minister John Swinney previously said people could expect a normal Christmas. It sounds like it's not going to be Christmas as we know it in Scotland.
I think that we all have to wait and see exactly where we are. And as you say, we are expecting to hear from the First Minister later on. But it's such a fast-moving situation. So I do hope that it is a better Christmas for a lot of people than it was last year. Aisha was just saying there that she was just on her own last Christmas, and that, you know, it has been really difficult for people. But whatever we do, I think we have to accept that this is a really challenging time, and we need to follow the guidelines that are there to keep us safe. And certainly not a situation any of us would have chosen to be in, but nonetheless, here we are, and we need to do our best to keep safe. And I hope we can enjoy some of it too.
Right, we're also expecting more.
For full disclosure, we are watching this retrospectively, as the vote has already been done and it has passed through Parliament with the support of Labour. There was like 80 or so Tory rebels and like 10 Labour rebels. Lib Dems voted against it. Jeremy Corbyn was part of the people opposing the Plan B measures, which included things like mask mandates and COVID passports for large events specifically. And there was also stuff about compulsory NHS vaccination. So it's an interesting set of principles that were voted on in Parliament. So let's continue.
More restrictions to be announced in Wales, if not today, then perhaps later in the week. Fraser, picking up on what Aisha said about that 200,000 Omicron cases every day, we heard from the Health Secretary yesterday. Do you think Boris Johnson's going to have to go further with restrictions?
Perhaps, yes. Certainly talking to people in government, a lot of them think that the restrictions right now are very lax. Why, for example, are we told we can't go to work, but we can go to parties? You don't have to be an epidemiologist to work out that's obviously irreconcilable, those two. Right now, of course, there's a lot of restaurants taking in huge amounts of money. This is the busiest time of the year. Now, perhaps Boris Johnson feels he can't really tell us not to go to parties when his staff were having so many of them in Number 10 last year. He's politically sensitive in that issue. But right now, the more concern that I pick up from government ministers that I speak to, the more I think that they are going to do something more akin to lockdown in about a week's time. OK,
well, that is very interesting. What's your reaction to that? More restrictions? I mean, you're not happy with the one of them that they're introducing today.
No, we need to be led, I think, by the science. So we need to see the data that then supports that. That means that the nation, goes with the government. That's what we need to see. My concern is that we are then leaning once again on our brilliant NHS to get us through this. And I have concern about whether or not we are ready. We're on the bus, off the bus here. We need to have a better system, a better crisis management capability to deal. There will be probably a requirement for a fourth jab, a fifth jab, and so forth. There may be another wave, another letter of the Greek alphabet that we'll associate with this. Are we prepared for this rather than just this final push over Christmas? That's the greater capability that I'd like to see the government lean into.
Well, you talk about the greater capability. I mean, literally in the last few minutes, we've just seen the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, tweeting in response to reports that there are no PCR tests available in England for people to confirm if they have COVID.
I'd like to see a new...
Yeah, like, it's interesting in that slowly over time, I've just become more like authoritarian pilled on the whole lockdown and like mandate kind of issue. I think vaccine or test is a reasonable policy with which to follow, which is what the Joe Biden mandate was, which is slightly different to what Plan B is over here, where large venues are going to specifically require vaccines rather than tests. But NHS participation should be vaccine or test, right? If you're going to your job, whereas because you need to be able to work to be able to survive. That's where I kind of stand on those particular issues, right? So you have to be able to vaccine or test. So it means that people who don't want to get vaccinated can at least still go to work, but you have no God-given right to go to fucking spoons and get wasted. Like, if you're gonna be in a large social gathering area, you need to get fucking vaccinated. I'm sorry. And I think that's a reasonable precaution with which to take. All the European countries are doing it. When I was on holiday in Cyprus, every restaurant was looking for your COVID pass, and this seems like a reasonable thing to do to control the spread of infection. Although people should be testing regularly as soon as possible. The crazy thing over the difference between over here and in the US though is that obviously in the UK you can just get as many free tests as you want from the NHS. You can just go and get loads of tests and just always have a constant supply of tests when you need to be able to go out. Whereas in the United States, either your company has to pay for the tests, which half of them probably won't want to, or you have to pay out of pocket for your own, which is completely ridiculous when it's a public health emergency. There was the White House briefing that Jen Psaki did when she was asked the question, well, why don't you hand out a free test? She's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Hand out a free test to everyone in America? I'm like, literally fucking yes. You have the biggest economy of any country in the fucking world. The least your government could do is make sure that everyone's tested so they're not going out spreading the virus, right? Like, super fucking simple. Should I think people should go? Should people go as far as, you know, the fines for non-vaccination you get in a place like Austria? Like, that seems like a little too authoritarian for me. Although, you know, the way people are going and the small amount which people are even bothering to follow even very small regulations is getting very exasperating from where I'm sitting, really. Yeah, like somehow the vaccine is free, but everything else isn't. I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So at least here, like, at least here you can get your tests free, your vaccines free. You can get your, you know, obviously your treatment if you catch COVID. That's all free as well. It seems like because that's obviously in the public good, right? Which is what the government should be fucking there for. That's what the state should be there, is to protect the public good, which apparently in America isn't the case. I'm gonna let this play. I'm getting myself a drink.
New government department created. We should have done this a long time ago. We did this for Brexit, for climate change as well. Why not for this pandemic as well? So they can lean into these issues and make sure we've got the right kid in the right place. We can't have this attitude that it's just another 3 or 4 months and then we're back to normal. No, COVID has been here for a couple years. It's going to be with us for a couple more years as well, because a new mutation is very likely to take place. That is the attitude. Deal with this in years, not in months.
Right. I mean, in terms of that infrastructure, we're being told now that they are available. Clearly, there's some mixed messaging, although I think briefly they weren't. What does that say, Aisha, to you about the infrastructure, the ability of the country to sort of answer the demand from the Prime Minister to jab 1 million people a day, or at least offer them boosters?
Well, a lot of this comes down to planning, and I do agree with what Tobias was saying about resilience in the system. And the Times carries a story today from lots of, you know, bosses in the NHS saying that they weren't adequately consulted with by the Prime Minister ahead of his big address to the nation on Sunday night, saying, look, we've got to, you know, hit this target of 1 million jabs a day. We've got to get everybody jabbed by the end of December. That's already looking like it's slipping. What bosses are now saying is it's going to be very difficult to hit that target. Possibly people will have their booking by the end of December. But I think with so much of this, there's the going out and making the big statement and the big pledge and the big promise. There is then backing that up with the logistics and the infrastructures and the systems and dialogue. And one of the lessons we have to learn from this pandemic across everything, government, local government, national government, business, is building more resilience into all our systems.
All right, well, while that is going on, let me just show you the Daily Express front page, if we can, because MPs like Tobias will be voting on new COVID rules for England later. Boris Johnson braced for a sizable Conservative rebellion, potentially the biggest of his premiership so far. Here it is. Boris pleads with rebels, back my balanced measures. We're expecting 4 votes today. Fraser, can you unpack what's happening in Parliament for us?
Well, right now, I mean, sure, technically they're voting against the vaccine passports, as Tobias has just told us he will. There are something like 81 people so far on the record saying they'll do that. We can probably expect perhaps some resignations today as people do that. Now, this is for 2 things. One, the government has failed completely to have any evidence, to provide any evidence at all that vaccine passports would work. So how could you ask Parliament to back something that the government itself can say? For example,
do you really need, like, the government to come out with, like, some kind of official memo telling you the vaccine passports work, when it just stands to, like, general reason that if, you know, when the science is so incredibly settled on the fact that being vaccinated it decreases your risk of spreading the virus, like, they're going to at least do something, right? They can't just do nothing if the spread is going to be lowered by, you know, by a high vaccination rate. I mean, it just, again, like, I guess maybe he is right that, you know, if they're going to pass through these measures, then they are going to have some. They should have at least some kind of briefing to go with it. But, you know, we are on like a short time period with regards to how quickly, you know, new variants are going to hit. So I don't know how practical that is.
Vaccine passport gives you the green light if you've had 2 AstraZeneca jabs. We found out a few days ago that 2 AstraZeneca jabs do not stop you catching Omicron. So in that case, why would you be any more safe, as it were, than somebody who hasn't had the jab? But if the government itself cannot explain this, then what we see is Boris Johnson pressing his majority button, thinking, you know, I don't have to explain myself. I don't care. I've got a big majority. You guys will do what I say. What we're seeing today is his party rising up saying, no, we will not do what you say. We are through having these half-baked ideas coming out of 10 Downing Street, whether it's with the Owen Paterson vote or other things, and they are saying, we're going to have you rely on Keir Starmer to get this through because the Tories will not back you.
Right, well, Kirsten, there have been COVID passes in Scotland for some time. Persuade Tobias and Fraser of the efficacy of them.
Do you know what? I think it's about the big picture here. So COVID passes are one in a number of mitigations that we have in place. And of course, you'll know that in Scotland, we've had a different approach to all of this. So we've been wearing face coverings in shops, on public transport and so on, all the way through. We've been
Like, I did a piece on it when there was like so-called fucking Freedom Day or whatever the fucking hell they called it, where they got rid of all of the restrictions or whatever. They just didn't keep the mask mandate for some reason. Like, even on public transport or in like crowded venues, it was insanity to me when, you know, they could have literally opened everything up, had no restrictions on where you can or can't go, or vaccinated, non-vaccinated, whatever. It was in July sometime. But something as super simple as just keeping the mask mandate would have massively helped reduce the spread. It was such a poor idea. And the fact that masks aren't mandatory in schools either, like, children, like, what's great, yeah, I posted this on Twitter, in that the vast majority of new cases that are coming through are all coming through from children because they're all mingling in schools, especially since they went back in September, right? Whereas the vast majority of the adult population, I think it's upwards of 80% now, is all vaccinated, at least double vaccinated. So the chance of them getting seriously ill with Delta, at least at the time, you know, 3 months ago, just getting seriously infected with Delta was incredibly fucking low. But it's been constantly spreading around through our schools. Children are getting sick, they're getting prosmia, they're getting loads of different, you know, long COVID side effects. They're never going to be, they're going to take ages for them to recover from. And it just speaks to the contempt the British like political media establishment have for, you know, young people and children in general in this country. That we have this massive fucking how's your father about how's your father? There's you have this massive fucking argument about whether or not you should need a vaccine to be able to go and get wasted in spoons, but no one's having any conversation about what's happening within our schools at this point in time, like the viral maelstrom that's being created by you know, a lax COVID policy with regards to schooling. I have, you know, friends who are parents who are taking children out of school because they're so scared about the way in which it's being able to just kind of freely flow without any kind of mitigation. And I completely sympathise with their point of view. It's crazy.
Been working from home where that's possible, all the way through. Vaccine passports are another one of the various elements.
Yeah,
that
do
we
they
can
work?
put into place. Well, you know, I think they do. I think that
Actually, there was a pretty famous, there was a clip going around Twitter of someone being arrested for not wearing the mask, despite the fact apparently they did have a an exemption from wearing the mask. But it is quite funny watching a bunch of like rightoids on Twitter going absolutely fucking crazy over the idea that someone would get, you know, accosted by the police for not following the law with regards to mask mandates or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, welcome to the real world, Whitey. Like, I'm not gonna say the C slur, obviously, but like, welcome to the fucking real world where you normal like working people in marginalized communities. These are the dealings that we have with police on a very incredibly regular basis, right? That's what life is like for black people in this country, and I find it incredibly fucking satisfying watching people who've never had to deal with any kind of adverse police interactions, because they've never had to deal with it in their fucking life, suddenly feeling like the, you know, the boot of the state on top of them, like, oh no, this is outrageous that I should be, you know, accosted for breaking the rules that have been made incredibly clear, rather than in the case of, you know, say for example an ethnic minority, where they're targeted completely independently of you know, how of the veracity of their claims of their law breaking, right? Whereas you're out there, you're clearly flagrantly breaking the law by not wearing a mask, and the police come up and tell you you're breaking the law, right? If you have an exemption, then fine. But if you don't have an exemption, then what the fuck are you doing? True, Prawn, true.
there is some evidence that as part of a suite of measures, then they are a useful and sensible mitigation. But none of these things are going to work alone. So we need these things in place. We need to make sure that people are taking up their boosters. If people have not already made arrangements to get a booster, please do so. Please go online and get yourself booked in.
Yep.
We need to make sure that people are following all of the sensible advice about face coverings, about hand hygiene. And yes, there may be more guidance to come. And we need to do all of these things. We need to recognise what we're dealing with here, particularly in the context of Omicron and the way that is day upon day expanding its vaccines reach into the population.
Right, well, you've heard what Kirsten has said. It's a suite of measures, but it is effective in terms of COVID passes. The government and Boris Johnson says that the measures that are being voted on are proportionate, and yet you're still not going to back it.
No, I'm backing all of it, apart from one element.
Well, you're not backing all of it.
No. I'm making it very, very clear. Plan B, I absolute support, but there's one element to do with vaccine passports that affects large venues, such as in Bournemouth. They themselves don't understand, and it won't make these venues any safer.
Right.
And it's the job of Parliament to scrutinise, to check what's going on. And if we don't do that properly, you get...
Like, he's not giving us any evidence that doesn't make it safer. Like, hey, thank you for the follow. That's appreciated. Like, I mean, sure, maybe, for example, if they had released a paper, like, it would give more veracity to their statements, right? And I think from like a general intuitive perspective, it should help mitigate the spread or whatever within these large venues. And that's why it's been adopted by plenty of countries all over Europe. But if they had at least produced a paper to be able to back up the measures they were putting in place, then him coming on Politics Live and saying, well, there's no proof that it would work, or someone would know, he's specifically saying it's proved not to work, rather than saying, there's no proof that it does work, right? It doesn't stand up to the government's plans aren't standing up to scrutiny because they've not scrutinised themselves. So it's frustrating that he's allowed to parrot what he's saying here, based upon the fact that the government hasn't put out any kind of any kind of justification for the measures they want to put in place, which they quite easily could, right? It's just being taken as read that because the government is doing it, we should take it as read that it's the correct thing to do. When they should at least give us some justification. Which again, as I said, I would agree with. I agree with implementing something like vaccine or test passports, or at least vaccine passports for large private venues where attendance is fucking optional, right?
Shoddy legislation coming through, and therefore this has to be policed. These are licensed premises that could lose their license. So how does this work at 1 a.m. when you get a stag party turning up, one of those characters doesn't have the right ID? How's that going to work? How does it actually make it any safer? Like I said, when you can turn up with a double vax certificate, which I've filled out as a vaccinator myself, I never thought that would be used as an ID card to get yourself in, because it doesn't protect you against the Omicron variant.
All right, well, sorry, Kirsten, go on.
I wasn't trying to come in there.
Sorry, sorry, no, it's all right, Aisha.
So, I mean, I hear what Tobias is saying, and certainly this new variant, it does look like it's very, very difficult in terms of the two vaccinations. But it's a slightly odd situation when so many big venues are doing this anyway. Tory Party conference did this, Labour Party conference did this. It's not just showing proof of vaccination.
That's preparation for these events.
It's also a proof of a negative lateral flow test. I do think people are getting a bit over the top about something which is happening in real life. The other thing where it could help, I do accept your point, it's not a silver bullet. I see what Kirsten's saying, it's part of something bigger. There is evidence coming out that where countries have introduced them, it is encouraging people who are yet unvaccinated to get the vaccination. So surely that is a good thing.
If this is a vehicle to encourage people to get that third vaccination, I think there are other ways of doing it, and we're already succeeding in that. Look at the queues outside St Thomas's and others around the country. It's happening already. I'm saying the venue...
Although saying look at the queues doesn't speak to the idea of how much the population is getting new vaccinated, getting boosters, etc., right? You can't just say, well, look, that's like saying, well, it's snowing now, so global warming doesn't exist. I mean, this is all kind of anecdotal information that you're doing here, but I do think that the vaccine take up in the UK has actually been pretty impressive so far.
Venues itself. This piece of legislation will not protect people inside those venues.
But there's still a hardcore group of people who are not going to get vaccinated.
All right, well, one person who is going to vote in favour of it for the Labour Party is the Shadow Health Minister, Andrew Gwynn. He is in central lobby for us. Can you persuade Tobias to actually vote in favour of the COVID passes later on today, as you and Labour are doing?
Well, of course, the serious challenge is knowing more about Omicron and buying us time to learn more about this particular variant. And they are not vaccine passports. If that's what the government was proposing, I wouldn't be supporting them. These are a sensible precautionary approach whereby you can have a negative lateral flow test and you can then have the confidence of being allowed in to large crowd events. I don't think it's unreasonable in a pandemic to know that everybody who's in there either has the...
Why is he joining from a fucking, echoey corridor? Who the fuck does the sound design for BBC? Like, you could literally have gone anywhere in this building and you're choosing a wide open space with echoey sound. I guess it's kind of epic, I guess, in the way that it carries the sound, but it doesn't make for good TV.
protection of being fully vaccinated or has the confidence of being cleared in a lateral flow test to be able to mingle in a crowded event. I just don't see what the issue is here. It is entirely precautionary, and I think, given the unknowns about Omicron, it is very common sense.
Let me cede my time to Fraser, because I think he's going to say exactly what I'm going to say.
They do not offer protection. That's the whole point. If you're between the age of 40 and 70, odds are you were given 2 double jabs of AstraZeneca. Unless you've had your vaccine, you are not protected against getting Omicron. This gives false assurance. This risks actually making things worse. The government's logic has collapsed. And in Scotland, there was a 70-page evidence document trying to find any evidence that they worked, and it failed. Our MP is really supposed to vote through something that the government cannot explain and which the government cannot provide any evidence for. There would be a rubber stamp, not a parliament, if it did so.
Andrew?
Well, look, if we want to...
Yeah, the timeline's fucked right now, isn't it? It's completely fucked. Can't say the C word. It's like 1984. No, I get it. Especially in the UK, things are just like crazy at the moment. It's intensely frustrating. But we should, at 10 p.m, we should be getting exit polls from the by-election. So there's be something, at least something fun to cover. Because like electoral politics is fun. I do enjoy it.
Say you've not been jabbed, therefore you can't come into a concert or you can't come into a major crowd event or a nightclub. I think that's a slippery slope. I think a good compromise, whilst we learn a bit more about Omicron, is to say if you've been double vaccinated, you can enter these big crowd events, and if you have a negative lateral flow test, you can also enter these big crowd events. We don't want to stop people being able to access big hospitality and pop concerts and nightclubs. What we want to do is ensure that everybody is as safe and secure as it's possible to be in these circumstances until we are able to learn a bit more about Omicron and the threats or otherwise that it might pose the general health of the population.
So has Andrew persuaded you to vote with your own party?
There's only so many ways we keep saying the same thing. 2 vaccinations will not beat Omicron. 3 vaccinations would. So if you offered 3 and said you must have the booster jab, or...
Have they provided any evidence for this, that specifically the booster is what protects against Omicron? Let me just have a look. Booster... Vaccine booster Omicron. Effective AstraZeneca. Omicron. 3 vaccine doses key for protection. Let me have a look against variants. Less effective, right? Well, that's not quantifiable. Please tell me how much that's effective. Dramatic drop in effectiveness for AstraZeneca, significant drop for Pfizer. 75% after a booster. Wow, 40-fold reduction. Okay, fair enough. Well, maybe they're right. Maybe I have to hand it to these Tory people. Maybe they weren't chatting shit for once. Check what this link. Oh, just give me the fucking. Don't load the. I just need to read the abstract. Oh god, I'm reading all of that. Fucking hell. So maybe if this is the case and the vaccines aren't as effective as they should otherwise be, I probably should research this before doing the first half of the fucking segment. But like maybe if like vaccines are just not as effective as we would otherwise have thought, especially if it's just double jabbed at that point, then maybe you just have to do a lockdown. Maybe you just have to put people back on furlough again. Like it's just frustrating. Like we have to mitigate it somehow, and if this evidence is correct, which I'm assuming it is, it's on the BBC, then you're just gonna have to lock down. You're gonna have to prevent people who are like make sure that the vaccine passports are specifically for people who are triple jabbed or who have a negative lateral flow test, right? I mean, maybe these guys have a point. I would definitely be able to do a better job at PM than Boris Johnson, without a doubt. But almost certainly better than Liz Truss as well. But yeah, like maybe you just have to go back into lockdown. It's just, hey ho.
Or the lateral test only, both of those would make good legislation. Yes. What we've got is something in between, which is bad legislation leading to these events scratching their head saying, this is not going to work. This is not going to make my venue any safer.
I've got a question for you guys. If the government sort of changed...
Hang on. If you haven't got the vaccine, having the lateral flow test is fine. Is like the halfway house policy that satisfies both parties? Then everyone can attend regardless of vaccination status. What the fuck is going on?
Their thing on this and came back and called this a lateral flow test certificate. Would that persuade you?
That exactly what the people in Bournemouth are calling for. This is our job, to scrutinise legislation. If it doesn't work, it's bad legislation. To put it in a big box and say, oh, come on, make an effort and support Plan B.
So your objection is the sort of 2 vaccinations, because that's now out of date. If it was up to date and it was just a lateral flow test and then 3 vaccinations when people had it, you'd be comfortable with that?
I would be comfortable with
All right, well, on that, Aisha's obviously tried to persuade you fairly successfully if it was changed. Has the Prime Minister called you?
No, he's not called me for a while.
He hasn't called you for a while. We're hearing, though, Fraser, that the Prime Minister is calling people like to...
Well, it's nice to see like the mandate skeptics on the right here, like at least coming up with practical solutions to change the legislation to make it better, rather than just blanket completely opposing anything that would have any kind of, restriction on where people could or couldn't go, right? Which I guess commendable.
To try and bring them around.
Yes, he's offering 2 things.
Well, it's crazy. It's like the regular backbenchers in the Conservative Party, just that's like way smarter than anybody's in the fucking cabinet, which is just full of like actual like fucking stuffed animal, like stuff like fucking scarecrows with no brains, with like fucking 5 brain cells to share between them.
The rebels. First of all, he's saying that he's going to drop his plan for a compulsory vaccination. He raised this as a prospect in his press conference last week. Maybe we should have a national discussion about it. Now he's calling them saying, look, I'm not going to do that after all. And the second thing he's saying is, I also promise that the vaccine passport will forever have a little bit added to it where a lateral flow test will come on. So maybe it's not a vaccine passport after all. Now, of course, the problem is that when they originally developed the technology for the vaccines, they promised us they would never bring in vaccine passports. Michael Gove did, Nadeem Zahawi did. Time after time we were told this will not happen. So we've seen a government that constantly changes what it says. So the slippery slope argument...
I must say, this is the poshest fucking regional accent I've ever heard in my life. Jesus fucking Christ. And he's got such a Tory haircut.
To say it's quite potent with a government that does go back in its word fairly regularly.
Right, well, Andrew, it's not just Conservative MPs, because your colleague Bel Ribeiro Adi was here on the programme yesterday saying that she felt really uncomfortable with the restrictions proposed. She said when you go down the road of attempting to force people into a particular position, especially when it comes to health, that goes down an authoritarian route. Is that what you're doing, going down an authoritarian route?
No, we're absolutely not. Look, we don't really know the full threat of Omicron yet, and what we do know is quite scary, that it is highly transmissible at a rate not seen in any of the other variants. And what Plan B allows us to do is to have a little bit of time without it completely wrecking the festive season, without having to undo some of the progress that we've made in recent weeks and months, but to buy that time to learn a bit more about Omicron. I don't think it's authoritarian to ask people to wear face masks in enclosed settings. I don't think it's authoritarian to expect people going to crowded events to show a lateral flow test that is negative. I actually think it's common sense and precautionary, and that's why we'll be supporting these measures tonight.
Right, there is a political point too, Andrew, because I'm hearing that Bell is now going to vote against certainly that part of the restrictions, if not all of it. There are potentially enough Tory rebels there. If you joined them, you could defeat the government on this.
Look, there's nobody more than I that would like to give Boris Johnson a bloody nose, but you have to pick and choose your battles. The fact that Boris Johnson is unable to lead his own party on these issues is a side issue for us, because this is about the health of the public in the United Kingdom. We don't play politics when it comes to serious issues of national public.
Right, okay, so I'm just gonna go off on a rant here. Okay, so playing politics is your fucking job. Your job is to be able to extract as much as you can for the interests of the people who vote for you as you possibly can, right? There was a government who was on the line to be able to lose a public vote on their own legislation. Now, I am not saying that you should vote against the measures. I think you should vote for the measures. But what you do is, if you know that you have the power in your hands to be able to publicly humiliate the Prime Minister as the opposition, then you should be able to use that as leverage to be able to bargain for positions that are going to make life better for your voter base, right? For the people who you support, or for the people who you think should be able to support you. Say, for example, I know working people who still are only getting paid £96 worth of fucking statutory sick pay. When that, this would be like, even if it was just sick pay and nothing else, even if it was only sick pay that they were using as leverage to be able to get put into the Plan B legislation so that they could vote with the government, that would do incredible amount of wonders to mitigate the spread of this virus. People have to keep coming into work because they can't survive on statutory sick pay. Like, if you get COVID and you say, well, that's it, I now can't pay my rent, then you're completely fucked, right? Like, it's such a small concession. Just make sick pay enough so that people can actually stay at home, and also, so they can actually be able to satisfy themselves. It's good for working people. It's good for the wider society as well. It's such a simple, common sense policy, and the fact that they're just like, oh, we're not going to play politics or whatever. I mean, they could literally, like, I'm of a very high opinion that if they'd have used it for leverage, for example, with regards to sick pay, the government would have they would have given in. They would have given in on that particular. They've gone, okay, well, if we will put it into our Plan B bill, you to vote with me on it, and I think that would have worked. I think you would have been able to extract that concession from them. But because they've got this obsession with looking centrist or whatever, like just continuing to move further and further towards the Tories and not even looking towards the people who they're supposed to represent, which is the workers who pay their fucking bills, right? People who put in the money for their campaigns, people who pay in union dues to be able to have the Labour Party that we have today. You have to, in Parliament, have these people in mind when these things come around, when these bills that are, gargantuan in nature with regards to the effect they have on members of the public. You need to be able to use these opportunities to be able to put through policy that's going to benefit the vast majority of working people in this country, if you're a party who is supposed to be for working people.
Health and biosecurity. I think it is really important that we play this with a straight bat and that we judge the plans before us fairly and considerately. It doesn't mean that we don't have issues with some of the proposals, we do, but what it does mean is that we are willing to support the government when it comes to the health of the nation.
All right, Andrew, thank you. Just before I get your response, Fraser, Kirsten, just confirm for our viewers, how are you voting? How's the SNP voting?
We won't be voting on these measures, although they do mirror the measures that are already in place in Scotland. So, certainly we have not got a problem with them in particular, but these affect England. So these are measures that we will be voting in Scotland.
Yeah, OK, Kirsten, thank you. How damaging is this, Fraser, for Boris Johnson to be relying on Labour?
Incredibly. I mean, Labour is playing politics. It's playing politics very well. It's worked out. But the most damaging thing they can do for Boris Johnson right now is to demonstrate that he can only get this through with Labour votes because his party doesn't back him anymore. Now, combine this with an opinion poll today showing that Boris Johnson's popularity has plunged to worse than it was under Tony Blair or Gordon Brown at this level, then all of a sudden you've got a party thinking, OK, this guy's stopping being popular. He's not really winning elections or got the potential to in the way that he did. And here he is with the Johnson-Starmer vaccine passport, forcing us against the wishes of his party. You combine that and you've got quite a good formula to give Boris Johnson a very difficult position in the new year.
Right. Aisha, are Labour exploiting this to their best advantage, do you think? Do you agree with their strategy?
I think they are doing the right thing, because I think it would be not in character of Keir Starmer to sort of suddenly play politics on public health when he himself set a test saying we were going to be a constructive opposition when it came to this pandemic. But I take Fraser's wider point. It causes Boris Johnson more long-term discomfort to know that he could only get this through because of help from the opposition. There's a very difficult by-election on the horizon as well with North Shropshire. There are local elections coming up, which will be with us very quickly.
I also massively disagree. I don't think anyone gives a shit about whether Labour actually vote with the government or not. They only really care about the impact of these policies. Maybe there's like a certain level of like incredibly politically active people, no names mentioned, who might change their vote based upon, whether Boris Johnson looks weak in regards to the Labour position. I really don't think that's the case. I just think it was capitulating when they could have extracted concessions.
In May, I think, and also I think we have to be realistic. The people who ultimately will bring down Boris Johnson, if that's what they want to do, will be Conservative MPs.
Tobias.
Well, I'm puzzled as to why the Prime Minister, number 10, is expending so much political capital on something that we've just proved in our previous discussion on that particular aspect, that particular slither of Plan B. It's unnecessary. It's an unnecessary
We found
battle.
the answer.
You know, I'd prefer to be discussing the potential of Russia to invade Ukraine. My Defence Committee has just come out with a report on the Navy being too small. We're not discussing any of these things. We're focusing on something which is an unnecessary battle. And I hope from Owen Paterson we can learn from this, because if anything, we do need to regroup, take stock, repair ourselves, because we have a general election in a couple of years' time. That's why we need to get things right.
Right. Do you think his authority has been shot to pieces over this?
Not shot to pieces. It certainly needs to be repaired, and it's not irreparable. We need to work on this now. But the first step in that is to recognise that you need to, reconcile and strengthen the bond between the Parliament, the parliamentary party, and number 10.
All right, let's talk about the impact of more cases and more restrictions, as we've been discussing, and what they're having on the economy. We can look at a story on the front of the Scotsman newspaper. I'll try and bring it up for you. Scotland tourism facing financial abyss amid £1 billion of losses after Christmas party plea to curb Omicron threat. There it is there. You can read it briefly as we go to Joanna Nethery, the co-owner of the 5 March restaurant in Glasgow. Joanna, have you been affected, or how have you been affected so far?
Absolutely. I mean, even just this week, we've just watched about £15,000 worth of cancellations come in over the last few days, which is just absolutely catastrophic, given this is kind of your month that you make.
Do none of these people have a fucking phone? Can they not get people to be interviewed on the TV just using their phone speaker? Like, even that, or like a shitty webcam microphone would get you much better quality than, which is clearly an inbuilt like laptop mic she's using here. Like, just do it on your phone. Just get a fucking stand. Like, I've literally got my phone on right here. Plonk it in front of you. Plonk it in front of you. Plonk it in front of you. What the fuck am I talking about? Plonk it in front of you and just fucking film yourself and talk into it. Like, phone microphones exist for you to be able to talk into, so they have to have the high enough fidelity to be able to get reasonable amount of quality from just the phone microphone. Why are we getting this fucking potato quality shit on a prime time BBC program? Fucking hell.
Take the money to get you through the start of the next year. We were talking with one of the guys the other day actually about how you have people that constantly turn up with problems, and then you have people that turn up with problems and solutions. And someone turns up with a problem and a solution makes you feel immediately calmer. Yet after 2 years of going through this, we are still left with absolutely no solutions from anyone in power. And when they eventually do tell us how things are meant to run, having effectively run around like headless chickens for a few months, we're then supposed to believe all the guidance that they give us.
How worried are you about the sort of next few months and year?
I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. I mean, we're a busy place, and the amount we're losing is going to really put us in quite a lot of trouble. So I can't imagine the kind of situation other people are in that haven't been as fortunate throughout the year.
Kirsten, can you offer any comfort at all to Joanna?
I think it's really understandable. What Joanna has said there is incredibly difficult, and particularly for businesses like hers at the moment. And I don't think anybody should pretend anything other than that. I think that we all have to recognise that. I know that there have been significant discussions going on about how best to try and provide the support that's needed. I know that Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford as well, I believe, have been in touch previously with the Treasury, looking to make sure that we can have support coming, because I think that that's going to be absolutely essential. We know that this is going to be a very challenging time. We know that there'll be a particular impact on businesses like Joanna's, and we need the Treasury to be forthcoming with the support that is going to be needed to support business and also to support individual employees too. So that's something that has to have a bit of urgency put onto it in the coming days, and it can't really be longer than that.
Right, but the SNP government has, you'll agree, effectively introduced lockdown by stealth by advising people to
I won't agree that.
cancel. Well, hang on, but you have said you should cancel your Christmas parties. That's the £15,000. It will have contributed that loss just for one business run by Joanna Nethery.
I don't think that is lockdown by stealth. I think we have to remember what lockdown was like, but I don't think that takes away from the challenge, the very real challenge that Joanna's business and others like her are facing. I do hope that, as well as the support that we are absolutely pressing the Treasury for, because it's absolutely vital for these businesses, that there is also the ability for individuals who may have thought about having a Christmas party, perhaps to postpone that. Let's not just completely cancel it. Let's hope that people can get together later in the year. But I do think the big thing that we need to see now is this economic support that
we'll talk about that. But does that work for you, Joanna, just asking people to postpone their parties then rather than cancel them?
I don't think that's in any way realistic. I mean, from the way we see things, we'd imagine that we'll be in lockdown come January, and I think that it's pretty naive if someone suggests that that's not an incredibly likely outcome. And I'd really like to remind everyone that actually in Glasgow, when the first major lockdowns happened, the local government did absolutely nothing to help anybody homeless or vulnerable, and it was actually myself and a bunch of restaurants that got together and ended up working with a charity to cook for 800 people a day and taking all the food down to George Square to make sure that the most vulnerable were actually looked after. And all these safe policies were nowhere to be seen, so I don't understand why now we're talking about looking out for people, whereas in the past there's been nothing to safeguard the most vulnerable people in the city every time.
Kirsten?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic what Joanna and her colleagues have done. I don't think that, I don't think we can ever overestimate the way that people came together in these immediate and really difficult times.
The council wasn't there. The SNP run council in Glasgow wasn't there. I think that's the point we're making.
I'm sorry, Fraser, I can't hear myself talking over you there, but I think that the other thing that we need to think about, though, is the nuts and bolts of what Joanna talks about in the here and now. So we absolutely do need.
Well, so much is just incredibly performative. It's just like, let's just say what people want to hear. I find it very frustrating that there is like the only kind of Labour Party politician who they've had on here, which literally just said a bunch of incredibly inane guff, and then just went away. And they have two different people who are staunch kind of Tories on like the main panel, who get the time and the space with which to have outwardly be able to express their opinions eruditely. And a Times journalist, for fuck's sake, because Times Spectator and a Tory MP on the main panel. Yet we have SNP joining by fucking Zoom. The Labour person spent 5 seconds from a fucking like an echoey chamber, and then yeah. You're absolutely right. Like, it definitely isn't lockdown by stealth. Like, lockdown by stealth. Like, how could you even do a lockdown by stealth, right? Doesn't make any sense.
That economic support that is absolutely essential, and that
clearly the answer is to give me a primetime job on TV to be able to host these news panels and just shout communist shit at everybody.
Does need to come from the Treasury, and I think her point about the bigger picture is really well made.
Right, we'll come on to that in a minute. Sorry, Fraser, what were you trying to say?
Well, Joanna was making the point that the SNP run council in Glasgow was not there. Of course, it's great, like people like her decided voluntarily to go and feed the homeless, but where were the local authorities in this? Now, this is a problem. When you come up with restrictions and lockdowns, there are always unintended consequences that hit the poorest hardest. So I can't believe it. Almost 2 years into this, we're about to do this another without a proper analysis of what we stand to gain and what we stand to lose. These vaccine passports in England would have a very big effect on businesses, but what do they stand to gain? Are they going to help at all? Even now, the government cannot do that basic calculation. When that happens, it's bad policy. Bad policy hurts the poorest hardest every time.
Kirsten?
Well, I think that the Conservative government are...
Well, let's just concentrate, because we've got Joanna on, and we're talking about the situation in Glasgow.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Joe.
Sorry, we're talking to Joanna, who is based in Glasgow, and talking about the SNP-run council there. So could you just respond to that, and then we're going to get into the funding from Westminster.
Absolutely, and I think councils all over Scotland and all over the UK, as well as the support that came from the third sector.
Yeah, I'm triple streaming to YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook.
And from people like Joanna and her colleagues.
You can see there's the messages the messages you can see actually on the stream feed are the ones with everybody else.
All played a huge part, and I think that is not accurate to suggest that the council were not at the front and centre of that, but I think that it would also be highly inaccurate to suggest that we could all collectively across Scotland and the UK and across the world, I'm sure, have got by the way that we did without people coming together as Joanna and her colleagues did. So this was a huge effort. We're obviously moving into another challenging situation, and that will take a huge effort.
Yeah, with more restrictions.
All of us, and we cannot do any of that unless the economic support is there, and that does, and I have to come back to that, needs to come from the Treasury.
All right, finally, Joanna, anything you would like to say in terms of what you would like to see right now to keep you afloat?
I mean, with all due respect, I don't think I ever need a Conservative MP to fight my corner, thank you for that, but we're looking at a VAT rate going back up at the end of March from 12.5% to 20%, as much as what I...
Always trust the Scottish people to do the right thing. Fucking love them.
I've just said potentially look bad against the SNP government in Glasgow. That wasn't particularly my intention. We really need to actually think about long-term effects of how we can start putting money back into independent business. Maybe perhaps some of the money that we managed to lose on track and trace could potentially be given to people that actually need it.
All right.
I'm fairly sure if I was hired to do a job and it didn't work, I wouldn't be allowed to get onto my boat and sail off into the sunset. There's absolutely no repercussions.
Joanna Nethery, thank you very much there in Glasgow. Let's just quickly show you this headline, since it's been raised by Kirsten. Businesses to get more funding and possible furlough support if further lockdown is imposed. Would you support that? Do we need furlough to be brought back?
I think the one good thing that the Rishi Sunak and the Treasury has done, perhaps different than other parts of the world, is actually to support businesses from the very start of this. It's a clever mechanism to make sure the skill sets are there, the businesses don't go under. But let's not kid ourselves. Many of them are on their knees now as well. So the furlough system was successful. And if we have to bring it back in, then absolutely I'd support it.
Right. But in what circumstances do you think? I mean, are we getting there to that point?
Well, we're now speculating. The news that's actually coming from South Africa, if that's any yardstick to take, is actually that, yes, it spreads very rapidly indeed, but it is much, much milder as well. So I don't think it helps to speculate at the moment, but it should be something that should bother the Treasury to prepare so we're ready when, if it's required.
Kirsten?
I think we need to be really careful about speculating, which is what you've just said you're not doing, before you went on to speculate about Omicron there. Even if it is milder, and we can't be sure about that, absolutely can't be sure. The thing that we can be sure about is how quickly it spreads. It's spreading so fast that even if it was slightly milder, the numbers of people who would be ill, who would be overwhelming the NHS, would be huge. So we need to take this really seriously, and we do need to take difficult decisions and put measures into place that will make sure that we can mitigate against this as far as possible.
Right, if people vote with their feet, Aisha, and simply stop going to restaurants and pubs, how much of a problem is that, do you think, for the Chancellor?
Well, I just really feel for...
Well, that's an interesting question. Like, 'cause I think even if you don't do any of these kind of mechanisms in place to force people into certain kinds of behaviour in the midst of Omicron, right? Even if you don't do Plan B, you don't do any policy, the threat of Omicron coming up will surely decrease footfall to these restaurants anyway. Like, I can't remember the last time, how many times I ever go out anymore. I used to eat out all the time, and now I just don't. I just don't do it anymore because I don't want to risk infecting myself or infecting other people, asymptomatically, right? Like, in the wake of this kind of stuff that's happening, places are going to lose profit just based on lack of footfall, regardless, because of people's wariness towards the new variants that are coming out, and any additional cases that do or any additional increase in cases in the UK is going to turn people away from these venues. So surely, like, the most kind of sensible kind of policy in that respect is to provide the financial support, and then also have restrictions in place about how many people you can have in certain spaces and what people can and can't do in those spaces, etc., etc. And then just have the financial support to back up the businesses in on the back end of that. Because whether you put these things into place or not, their footfall is going to decrease, and some people are going to go under because of it.
For hospitality and all business, I feel that there's already a huge chilling effect because of the arrival of Omicron. Christmas is the golden time of year for hospitality, for so much retail. My own old line of work, comedians, performers, it's the time of year when everybody does good over that, because it takes you through for that first quarter. And the problem is, so many people are cancelling bookings now because they're so worried, and yet there is no support. And the government, understandably, hasn't put those restrictions in yet because they don't want to pay the support. But I think if I was Rishi Sunak, I would get on the front foot on this. I would start drawing up a package to help people now.
Is that likely?
See what I said?
I wouldn't say likely right now. I mean, a lot does depend on South Africa. They had a report this morning out showing that it is 1/3 less potent than the old variant, and they haven't locked down. Look, right now, I wouldn't know anything else. We don't know. But nothing I would say is either likely or unlikely right now. Who knows?
All right, and we may talk more about the economic impact with the Shadow Chancellor, I should say, Rachel Reeves, who's on Politics Live tomorrow at 11:15 ahead of the Prime Minister's questions. So let's talk about Human Rights Act reform, because the government is launching a set of reforms to the Human Rights Act. One of the issues it says it wants to address is foreign criminals abusing the right to a family life. Here's Justice Secretary Dominic Raab speaking earlier.
The example I would give is the frustration of deportation orders by foreign national offenders claiming the right to family life.
I fucking despise this man. Like, he's literally the where the fuck is your chin, like, white nationalist guy. Like, it's literally all he reminds me of. He's a fucking odious piece of shit. I hate him.
I think there's a good example of elastic interpretations of rights, which has resulted in what I would argue is abuse of the system. This isn't a criticism of the judges, it's a criticism of the Human Rights Act. We can strengthen our tradition of liberty, but add some common sense, and that's what our plan will achieve.
Tobias, do you agree that the Human
Yes, the common sense of just removing people's civil liberties, sure, let's go for it.
Rights Act is hampering our ability to deal with foreign criminals?
For me, I see this as a bigger picture. We need to be able to sort of return the foreign criminals. There needs to be that agreement in place. I'm sorry that we have to end up changing legislation in this way to do so. Because
do you think it needs to be changed?
Well, I'm going to look in detail as to what's been proposed. It's only just come out today. My wider concern is the fact is, are we perceived to alienate ourselves, from the rest of the world here? In the international rules-based order is eroding. We need people to stand up for it. It needs to be shaped in a way that brings people together, rather than carving a method which takes us away from the collective.
But is Dominic Raab right that it's the Human Rights Act in his mind that is hampering our ability to deal with deporting foreign criminals?
The piece I'm concerned about is that we're using that vehicle to make that case, and whether it is or not, that'll be debated in the House. My wider concern, as I say, is the fact that if parts of the world are dangerous and people then choose to come here, they're not able to be sent back there because those places have become too dangerous. This whole issue to do with, let's say, migrants that are coming onto the shore as well. They come here because their part of the world is now inhospitable, it's dangerous, it's lacking governance or security, yet we don't then focus on those places to go to the source of the problems in the first place.
Right.
We gave up in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and
yeah, I mean, the problem is you won't admit that the reason why these places are in the state there is the value chains in a post-colonial imperialist like imperialist kind of global capitalist hegemon, right? You can't just admit that, oh, well, maybe these people are coming over because we fucked over their countries, however many years ago as part of the British Empire. Like, this is a lot of the reasons why people end up having to come here, or through foreign wars, or through interventionism, etc., etc., etc. Poorly drawn borders, post-colonialism. It's all these are issues that have far-reaching consequences from incredibly far back. So, I mean, he's correct in saying that we do need to have a look at making sure the places that they are coming from are hospitable anyway, because we don't want people to have to want to trek across halfway across the fucking globe to get a decent standard of life, because the global north is continually engaging in resource extraction even to this day, that makes it difficult for these places to be able to build a solid footing without Belt and Road or whatever. So yeah, I mean, at least you're missing half of the problem.
Places like that.
Right. Why is Dominic Raab doing this, Fraser?
It's a kind of tidying up exercise after Brexit. I mean, previously, you could appeal against the British government by appealing to the court in Strasbourg, and the British government was powerless to tweak the system. But right now, it can do what it wants. So it stands to reason that once you've left the EU, you would have a system. Say, for example, if you want to say to somebody, look, you've lost your asylum appeal, but we're not going to let you say that you've got the right to a family life here for the next 7 or 8 years. We want a far more defined system. That's perfectly logical. And also, the asylum backlog right now is absolutely huge, which is in itself driving the channel problem, because people are coming to Britain knowing that the asylum system is in complete chaos. And there's little effective chance of deportation. You can spend years gaming the system. He's trying to clean up the system.
Kirsten, your response is the government says 70% of successful human rights challenges, which amounts to about 700 cases in the last 5 years, are brought by foreign national offenders citing a right to family life. Do you think there is then some merit in clarifying at least the circumstances in which people can use this as a defence?
This is really poor stuff, to look at trying to get rid of human rights legislation, to be trying to tie that up, as Fraser's just done, with people that are fleeing from war and all kinds of terrible situations that have driven them to cross the channel in the most dangerous and terrible circumstances. This is all wrong. This is absolutely not the direction that anyone would or should think is a positive for the country. And I think it's a really sad day and a really disappointing, although perhaps not surprising from my point of view, way that Dominic Raab is proposing that these things go. It's an odd way to suggest it's a bit of progress to try and get rid of the Human Rights Act and to try and move away a wee bit from the rules-based order. That is never going to lead to positive things.
Fraser?
It's about who decides the rules. The point of Brexit was the rules should be decided in our parliament. Nobody's really talking about any weaker protection of human rights. It's just about how those rights are defined.
But they are going to be weaker. Like, there's always how those rights are defined. Yet in a weaker manner is what's going to happen. Like, at the end of the day, like Fraser. I mean, the fact you're saying, well, we can't, we've got such a silent backlog, we need to be able to deport people. And I'm just like, well, that's bad. Like, and especially when you know, like, when I think it's like 75% of these asylum cases are either accepted first time or then accepted after appeal. So clearly the issue is getting through the backlog of cases and putting, effective systems in place to get these people through and get these people sorted. Get these people into the country, because there's not that a huge amount of them. I think it was like 150,000 like total asylum seekers who currently have either settled status or in the middle of having the applications processed at the moment. It's not exactly a massive number. And the amount of people coming from the amount of Syrian refugees specifically we've taken is only 23,000, which is miniature in comparison.
And reducing the ability to try to manipulate the system and playing legal games with it. So I don't see it as rights being abolished. It's simply the fact that those rights are defined now by the people elected in this country.
Let's have a look at this headline in the Daily Telegraph. New free speech law to protect against wokery and cancel culture. I can get my mouth around those words. Aisha, something else. Dominic Raab says, and I quote, a combination of court-innovated privacy law, licensed by the Human Rights Act, and the hypersensitivity of some in our society to opposing views has incrementally and surreptitiously whittled away the scope for the rambunctious debate which is essential to our democracy.
That's fucking ridiculous. Fucking state. Who the fuck says rambunctious in fucking 2021? Jesus Christ.
Your response?
I'm slightly incredulous. This is a really, really important thing that the Human Rights Order, for all the reasons that Tobias Ellwood has set out, to kind of reduce it to a culture war makes me think this is a distraction because of all the other fundamental things that are going wrong that we've been talking about, including...
True! 100% true. Absolutely on the money. It's just a distraction technique. It's just like, oh, look at the fucking culture war. Look, wait, jingle the keys in front of the boomers. Oh, look, go follow the culture war. Follow it's too woke. The problem is it's all woke. It's unironically, for the amount of times these fucking ripoids like 1984 as the idea of societal collapse, and say, oh, all these new genders is just newspeak, and I'm like, well, there being more words to describe things is literally the opposite of newspeak. Like what is actually newspeak is there being no room for any kind of nuance in any issue, just putting things in the woke box, right, or the patriotic box, and it just being like this just being the only ways in which you can discuss these issues. I saw an article in the fucking New York Post that says that Osama bin Laden was describing Osama bin Laden as being fucking woke or whatever. The fact that we can't even have discussions about the actual issues that are at hand or the statistics behind them, it's just, is something woke or is it not woke? Is this it is literally fucking straight out of George Orwell's brain. The people are being conditioned and having their consent manufactured to see things through such a ridiculous and completely not all encompassing binary lens, right? And then just turning into like culture war team sports. I fucking hate it. It's a really good Tom Nicholas video about the culture wars as well worth watching. I'll drop the link later on.
Fundamental structural issues with Boris Johnson's leadership. Couple of things. I'm old enough to remember when David Cameron attempted to try and change human rights law. It's very, very difficult to do for a reason, the reason that Tobias sets out. But even the security chiefs, who are not wokery in chief, GCHQ, MI5, MI6, Robert Buckland, the former Justice Secretary, have just warned Dominic Raab, saying, be very, very careful, because when you start tinkering with this, there are unintended consequences. And holding up the straw man of the, here is the evil foreign criminal who beats his wife and does all these things, and we have to get him off. Fine, but why don't we, instead of ripping up really important legislation, why don't we look at what we can fix closer to home? Our domestic legal system is an absolute mess. Rape has practically been decriminalised. Sexual offences are going unpunished. There's a huge backlog in the court system. There are systemic problems with the prison and the probation system. So if the Justice Secretary wants to get tough on criminals, and I will back him all the way, let's start closer to home and fix the domestic problems.
Fraser, on this issue that Dominic Raab...
Or how about improve the material conditions of the society and the crime rate will go down? I mean, that's just how that works. Poverty is an incredibly reliable indicator of criminality. Like, not difficult.
Mentions, has the Human Rights Act really whittled away the scope for rambunctious debate?
No, not really. There's a whole bunch of forces undermining free speech, but I wouldn't say that the Human Rights Act is one of them. You've got to be very careful when government says it wants to protect free speech. I mean, they'll be regulating the press in a second. They'd love to get their hands into on the online YouTube and etc. They'd love to. Really, the so-called online harm bills, for example, would put a really big chill down free speech if it were to go ahead in the way the government wants. So I don't think you should really trust governments to protect free speech. I think the more distance you put from them and the press, the better.
Let me just show you this headline in The Times. J.K. Rowling attacks Orwellian transgender rape policy. J.K. Rowling has criticised the police in Scotland for saying they will record rapes by offenders with male genitalia as being committed by a woman if the attacker identifies as female. Police Scotland has confirmed it will do this if an accused person insists, even if they haven't legally changed gender. Kirsten, is Police Scotland right to be doing this?
Do you know what? I think what we should be looking at here is probably going back to what Aisha just said. If somebody is accused or convicted of rape, then we need to be dealing with that properly, and perhaps asking ourselves also why there are so few people who are convicted, because that actually is where a huge gap exists, and it's a really troubling one. It should really trouble all of us in the context of all of the recent narrative in terms of women expressing the challenges that they face day and daily, and we identify this, and yet we're going off down this road instead of saying, hold on a minute, is there a problem here? Yes, there is a problem, and the problem is violent men.
Can you answer the question that I posed to you about Police Scotland? Are they right to be doing what I've just read out?
I mean, she's absolutely right that it's a literally fucking non-issue. All it is just a change in the way they tabulate the statistics. That's literally all it is. They're not even mentioning prisons. They're not mentioning any of the ways in which people have access to certain facilities. It's literally just like, well, this is just how the statistics works now. It drives me around the bend, it really does. It's such a complete non-issue that's been deliberately driven for fucking factional cultural bollocks by an online cult led by a billionaire who lives in a castle and should know fucking better.
I would need to look at the detail of that, but they will be requiring to record what somebody tells them. I think that that's incumbent upon them. And I know that if somebody was convicted, then there are proper risk assessment processes that are quite robust that the Scottish Prison Service have in place. But I don't think that any of that takes away from...
True, there is robust systems in place, right? They're not going to put anyone who might be a threat to other prisoners into Gen Pop at that time. Right? If you think someone is a genuine threat on that kind of list, you can just move them into somewhere away from the general population within the prison system. Like, Yeah, literally, like trans people are just we're just the culture war issue du jour, used as a political football to so interest away from class politics. It's incredibly frustrating. Um, but yeah, but this SNP MP is 100% correct in that there's plenty of mitigation there, regardless of people, regardless of whether somebody is cis or transgender. If they would be some level of threats to other members of the prison population, that there's plenty of cis women who go to prison for sexual assault cases. Obviously, not rape in the UK. 'Cause you have to have a penis to be able to rape in the UK. So obviously, it's going to skew the statistics in some manner because we literally cannot record cis women with rape in this country under our current law. It's not like the US where it's just penetration, any kind of unwanted penetration is classed as rape, whereas in the UK it has to specifically be done with a penis, which is a different differentiation in the law there. But it is what it is, right?
The absolutely central point here, which is that if there are, as there are, violent criminals out there attacking women, these are situations that need to be dealt with very seriously. And we need to ask ourselves why the conviction rate for these cases is so low.
Well, Kirsten seems to be saying it's fine for Police Scotland to be doing that, to allow...
Which is also making the incredibly salient point here, which is that this shouldn't be the fucking key focus, and the fact that we're still talking about this when we could be talking about conviction rates and the way in which we can mitigate these things from even happening in the fucking first place, whereas we're having like this incredibly long and tedious argument over the way statistics are tabulated. It's fucking nonsense. It's brain rot. All it is. I mean, not in the eyes of the British government, you want, and I think that's wrong. I agree that that's wrong. That I think it should be classed as rape if it's done, with a foreign object. It doesn't. I don't think penis should be specific, but that's unfortunately just the idiosyncratic nature of of British law in regards to this issue, which it's frustrating because if that the way the law was done wasn't like that, we wouldn't be having this discussion in the first place.
People to self-declare in this particular instance. Do you agree?
Well, I think what this shows is just how we've ended up in a terrible position when we're debating these very controversial issues around biological sex, transgender rights and gender identity. And I think there'll be a lot of women who, if they had been raped, would not be happy with what Police Scotland are doing. But I think there's a broader issue about how we debate these. We have got to be able to have sane, respectful, calm, kind, evidence-based discussions about this. J.K. Rowling has been absolutely hounded. She was doxxed recently on social media.
She was not fucking doxxed. Her address is known to basically anybody who lives in the fucking area. It's on Google. It's on Google. You can just fucking Google it. It's on tourist guides of Edinburgh. She was not fucking doxxed, and she wasn't hounded. She just had people responding to her on the Bird app. Right? Don't want to have people pulling you up for your shitty fucking opinions. Don't put your shitty fucking opinions on fucking Twitter. Very, very simple. When I say stupid shit on Twitter and people call me out, I usually just delete the post, to be fair. But I don't go crying to the fucking gutter press, going, "Oh no, I'm being cancelled for having my views having my views opposed by people." Fucking hell, grow the fuck up.
Expressing some views, that is not okay. But also, transgender people face a horrific time as well. They're always portrayed as rapists or cheats or something terrible. There's got to be a sensible, moderate view. And within the SNP, by the way, there are big divisions on this. Joanna Cherry had a terrible time in terms of, her views on this.
Good. Fucking these people have they're bullies with brain rots and they deserve to be stood up to. I'm sorry, they're using their incredibly large positions of influence and power to be able to attack a minority with very little justification at all whatsoever. It's all done essentially based on feelings over facts as far as these people are concerned, because they all it is anecdotes. They never pull up statistics. And when they do pull up statistics, it's incredibly fucking dodgy shit, like what they did with the BBC article. It's mind bending, and the fact that how many famous trans journalists do you know in any like high level kind of British press institution do you know who have had any kind of airtime of this issue? I'll tell you the answer. It's fucking none of them. It's literally fucking zero people. Yet you've got Janice Turner and you've got J.K. Rowling, you've got Joanna Cherry and you've got Alison Bailey giving these huge fucking platforms to be able to smear trans people as being potential rapists or whatever, and not presenting any kind of fair evidence-based approach to this, and with new poorly evidenced statistics and lies and smears and half-truths. and they don't get any fucking pushback. People don't platform people who are be able to take them to task on this shit. It's disgusting and inhumane. I fucking despise the way the media institutions in this country treat treat this discussion. I mean, which we could theoretically have, but the people who are on the opposing side are just so unbelievably callous and dismissive, and quite frankly nasty over this issue. And when as soon as you pull them up on it, they call cancel culture. I fucking hate it. It drives me around the bend.
The courts have recently even ruled on this. It is legitimate to have two views on this.
Yes.
And it cannot be beyond the wit of man, woman or whatever to come together and find a way through.
Right, but is it correct, Kirsten, because you weren't precisely clear, do you back Police Scotland's right to say they will record rapes by offenders with male genitalia
Stop
being
asking
committed
this
by...
fucking question, who cares? Let's actually have a discussion about the real issue at hand here, rather than this manufactured culture war bollocks.
A woman if the attacker identifies as female. Is that correct?
I think it would need to be an individual case-by-case analysis of that. And I think that what Aisha said there is right, that we need to be able to talk about these issues sensibly and without getting into the headline-grabbing stuff, which does nobody any good whatsoever.
Well, it's not headline-grabbing, it's what Police Scotland actually said and stated, but I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Bye-bye.
God, fucking... What a trash fucking moderator for that. Jesus fucking Christ. Hey-ho, it is what it is. Just gonna have to get used to it. Exactly. It's like there is legitimate reasons to despise cancel culture. I mean, you just have a look at fucking what happened with ContraPoints, right? It's super easy to have a look at somebody who's been ostracized from their own kind of internal community, right? With regards to things that they said, like that's really kind of being cancelled. Having your kind of support network stripped away from you, but literally all that's happening is people having their views opposed on the Bird app and them getting in having a fucking shit fit about it. It's and that these though the unironic snowflakes, the people who literally refuse to have any of their views questioned or opposed within public discourse, because for far too fucking long, like centrist kind of liberal journalists in the British print and online media have just spent the entirety of their careers having zero opposition, just be able to post whatever fucking inane shit as articles in their weekly column that they get with some fucking rag. They've had no pushback at all or anything. They've just been able to say whatever they want without any kind of consequence, without any kind of pushback. And then suddenly, with the birth of online social media and with the birth of the the online public forum and the online water cooler conversations that we have about these issues, suddenly they realize that they're not dictating stone tablets like Moses on Mount Sinai, whether they're just people with opinions whose opinions can be opposed. It's as simple as that. And they just hate having their opinions opposed. I mean, a lot of people do hate having their opinions opposed, and that's fine. You're allowed to hate it, but then calling it cancel culture rather than just a discussion in the public forum is crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy. Again, it's just people who want to have the right to be listened to rather than the right to be able to speak. Right? That's all it is. That's all it is. Also, I forgot what else I was even going to talk about today. At least that's Plan B and trans shit covered already. Did I turn off tweeting? Am I an idiot? Did I not tweet out the stream? Well, I guess I should tweet that out now. I do enjoy that my Twitter bio says 5 of you, Andy, and I currently have exactly 5 viewers. Clearly, I'm very prescient in my points of view. Let me copy my stream title. Oh yeah, the John Cleese thing. Right, speaking of cancel culture. Yeah, so speaking of cancel culture, so John Cleese had got himself into a lot of hot cancel culture discourse as of recent, in the past kind of year or whatever. in essentially people like a one. So I think one point an episode of Faulty Towers got removed from a bunch of streaming services for containing the N word, which was only on some streaming services, but not on all of them, and it was only just the one episode. Whereas it wasn't Faulty Towers getting cancelled; it was it was a single individual episode of Faulty Towers that got removed from some streaming services. So Faulty Towers wasn't even cancelled, but John Cleese lost his fucking shit. He lost his mind. He's on the turf band. He's on the turf kind of bandwagon as well. So he's got a documentary coming out. I think was it for Channel 4 about the state of online discourse or something like that or whatever. I'm not gonna watch it, but maybe I should watch it on stream. Maybe that's a good thing to watch on stream. But anyway, regardless, he's gone to a lot of hot water. He's been railing against the woke snowflakes, just like everybody, every fucking, washed up old comedian who's not done anything in fucking years and just trying desperate to cling to relevancy. But anyway, he's got this thing coming out. He's got an upcoming tour. I think it's a book tour, maybe. I'm not sure. But regardless, he was on the BBC being interviewed. And he is complaining about it because he thinks the interview was somehow unfair. Let me find the interview. I found this thing before I started the stream rather than having to search for it first of all. John Cleese complained of a BBC interview. Oh, I can watch it in full on this page. Perfect. So let's have a look at what he had to say in this particular interview.
Wonderful to have you on the program, John. I want to start by asking you.
Nice to be here.
I know that you're particularly interested in talking about cancel culture. I think it's fair to say. I understand, in fact, you're making a documentary about it. What is it about cancel culture that interests you?
Well, it's a relatively new phenomenon, and of course, it affects comedians because.
Right, okay, first of all, it is definitely not a new phenomenon in the fucking slightest. This was the guy who grew up during Mary Whitehouse. There's even a Monty Python skit about people who were offended by the things that Monty Python were doing in the 70s. There's even a skit that they did about that, where it's actually quite a funny one as well, where they're essentially some guy goes into a funeral parlor with his mother's body and they suggest eating her or something, and then they have a fake audience doing mock outrage in response to it, right? So he knows already that it's not a new phenomenon. It's been around for ages. The Dixie Chicks got cancelled for opposing the Iraq War. Magic the Gathering got cancelled because they were using satanic imagery. There's always been some kind of backlash to certain kind of cultural tropes and texts that's existed since there has been culture. There's been culture and backlash, and that's always happened. It is 100% not a new phenomenon, right? But it's just the people who have the voice now are people who are previous communities who previously had no voice because the internet is such an all-encompassing, forum for ideas, a forum for discussion that has given basically anybody who can get on has access to the internet a voice, be able to speak that, whereas they previously wouldn't have done. So to say that it's a new thing is nonsense.
Because a lot of us do jokes that the cancel culture people, the woke people, don't think are right or don't think are correct. So I've been asked to do the program. So I've been exploring it. I've been reading quite a lot of books and trying to understand what it's all about. But it's quite a complex matter. And it seems to be boiling down to the fact that I think some people are rather overprotective. I mean, we all want parents to be protective, but we don't want them to be overprotective because that raises children who are not perhaps very well going to adapt to the real world. I think it's very
Yeah, that's very true, right? Because I turned out very poorly because my parents never exposed me to any racist jokes or any homophobia or transphobia when I was growing up. That never happened, and in many ways, I've never recovered from that lack of education growing up, and I've just grown up with such a soft skin from not being exposed to enough transphobic arguments from people. Get a fucking grip, John. What a load of absolute fucking bullshit. Like, you don't need to hear. You don't. It's not going to make you a more hardy and better person just because you listened to more like racist humor growing up. Get a fucking grip. Like, I think we can all agree that there are basically, when it comes to free speech, these things like this, everyone agrees that there are limits. The discussion we're having is where those limits lie. And free speech, I will also remind people, is to do with what the government say you can and can't do. It's nothing to do with whether or not some venue won't book you because you're Roy Chubby Brown and literally all of your jokes are just laugh at the non-white people, right? Laugh at the women, laugh at the gender and sexual minorities. So that's and again, that's always been happening as well. People cancelled shows for people who they thought weren't, they thought were who were too racy or too offensive or whatever. That's always been the case. Again, that's not a new phenomenon either. And it's not that we don't think that they're right or whatever. They think that we just kind of think we just people who are throwing their arms, the people who oppose certain things like this, the woke mob or whatever, the people who are doing the cancelling, they think that they're opposed to certain things for them not being right or not being good, rather than a consequentialist argument about the kind of behaviours that this is going to engender in society if we don't view them with a critical lens, right? If you just let people willy-nilly going around, doing a racism or whatever, and especially when it comes to something like comedy's always been a vector for social attitudes. It's very rarely you have kind of, especially like famous comedy, that isn't in any way at some point kind of culturally, politically, or socially motivated in the kind of commentary that it makes. It's all TV dinner discourse, right? It's always had some kind of message or edge or specific point of view that it's trying to push with the comedy that's being done. That's always been the case. And the point of view is that if you have a society that is overall in general being permissive of things that could theoretically lead to overall societal harm by being normalized through comedy, that can make life materially worse for people in disenfranchised communities, right? I would agree, but I think in a lot of instances that goes too far, right? But at the end of the day, we need to at least have conversations about what we do and don't think is acceptable, and people should be able to challenge those who are saying things that do genuinely cause societal harm overall. For example, you have a look what happened with Dave Chappelle and the kind of people who are now going to get exposed to transphobic talking points because he doesn't do his fucking research. See what I mean?
That things should go wrong and that minor bad things should happen, because that helps people to learn to become a little bit tougher when they go out into the world, which is not a terribly friendly place a lot of the time. And if we overprotect them, then I think that doesn't work very well.
But John, some would say that what you're suggesting is that it's an old...
Why do you say but? Why do you say but?
Oh, it was just
Wouldn't
a turn of phrase.
Just explore what I'm saying.
Yes, yeah. That's precisely what I'm...
Whoa, imagine getting fucking triggered by the word but. Right? She's not saying us. She's just making a conversational point, right? She is interviewing you, and so she is asking you to make a clarification on a statement that you're making with some kind of alternative hypothesis, right? This is literally the fucking Ben Shapiro interview. Or at least I'm assuming it's going to be. I've not watched it yet. The idea that someone challenged on it was like, oh, whoa, I'm on here to be able to extol my virtues as an orator, not to be challenged on my viewpoints. Whoa there. But, this is the BBC, right? You've got to expect at least some pushback to be able to clarify and solidify the viewpoints that you hold. It's just me Ben Shapiro all over again.
That's precisely what I'm about to do, if you would give me the opportunity to do that. I want to ask you, there are people out there who, having heard your views, would consider them to be old-fashioned and not taking into consideration the feelings of people who have been hurt by some of these comments. And I want to give you the example, for instance, in Britain, where racist behaviour, for instance, was couched as a bit of banter. Is that acceptable, in your view, as a joke?
I think it's a very poor question.
I'd like you to answer it.
It's literally the Ben Shapiro debate. It's literally Ben Shapiro versus Andrew Neil, except even more softball than Andrew Neil. So like, I don't agree with the way in which you phrase this question. It's literally he's literally being Ben Shapiro right now.
Well, it's hard because it's so scattered and it has so many different ideas in it, and I don't know which place to start with to answer it. What I've said is the important thing is that people are protected to the...
Like, I know that you're old, John. I know that your brain is just kind of turned into goo at this point, but you can at least understand the point that she was trying to make there was, maybe we should at least have some kind of consideration to the effect of the words that you say. That's literally all that she was saying.
right degree, not overprotected and not underprotected. So the question becomes, what is the right degree? Now, the practitioners of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very successful therapy, which is used a lot to treat depression and anxiety in young people, say that the woke ideas are pretty much the opposite of what they use to make people less depressed and anxious. Now, it doesn't matter whether that's old-fashioned or new-fashioned or even from the early 12th.
I mean, he's not even explaining what I'm assuming what he's talking here is about trigger warnings or whatever. But that's nothing to do with depression and anxiety. Trigger warnings have to do with PTSD, right? It's just as I was talking about on stream before. It's literally the analog to the viewer discretion was advised thing we used to get on TV shows. So, like, and again, I don't even think that I think the efficacy of CBT is disputed. Not that CBT, to which the efficacy is incredibly high. The other CBT is very, very high. Getting people to pass their motorcycle tests. But yeah, like, the fact that he's kind of honing in on something as like innocuous as trigger warnings rather than the actual point, was we all know this is mostly in the context of kind of cultural texts and cultural tropes and things like that. We're not really talking about trigger warnings with this debate, because I think that's, and again, even then, trigger warnings and content warnings was kind of something, of like 3 years ago. It's not really the same discourse that it is now, to be honest.
Century. That is a very interesting idea and needs to be explored without using these emotional terms like people being hurt and all this kind of thing. Let's try to be a little bit more calm about it and use less emotionally loaded words.
What if I went on TV, John, and said I wanted to redact you in Minecraft, right? Would you be hurt by that, wouldn't you? You'd be hurt. Like, I would say, well, I'm not going to do it, but that's something that I would enjoy doing. I would enjoy redacting you in Minecraft. But you'd be hurt by those feelings, wouldn't you? So that would be bad of me to say. There's no positive utility in me me expressing those things. Why should I say it when I know all that's going to do is, hurt your feelings? Because that's kind of what I want to do. By making that statement, or what would be the purpose of making that statement if it's something I genuinely intend on doing, right? So again, there's always like the line of which we take not only personal offense but an overall societal effect into question when we look at the kind of things that we feel people should be more moderate regarding. But we've always done that, and that's always been some level of social contract that governs that as well.
Are you saying that people
I think you were going to ask me. Are you going to ask me about being here in Singapore to do shows and in Bangkok, or is that at the back of your agenda?
No, we certainly did ask you about that, John. Why have you chosen Asia as a place to do these comedy shows, particularly when we're in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, it's very hard to plan at the moment, as you might have noticed. I don't know. You probably realize that sometimes a new variant comes along at very short notice and causes a great deal of disturbance very, very quickly. So these shows were arranged some time ago when there was a good chance that the Delta variant was coming under control. Then the Omicron one came up about 3 weeks ago, which of course changed it all. But our plans have been set way before that. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, indeed, it does. Have you had to change your routine at all because of the pandemic, or make adjustments to it?
No, I haven't started to write it yet because I don't do it for 3 weeks. And I have a great deal of material that I've sort of accumulated over the past 15 years. The first time I started doing this kind of show was 2006. So I'm going to choose the material that I think is right. But I've been asked to base it on a talk that I have, which is about why there is no hope. The main central point of which is the fact that one of the great problems these days is that everyone wants to be right and nobody really wants to listen to other people's opinions.
Are you in that?
Well, as long as people's opinions, are based on rational, some kind of like level of rationality, and some, I mean, I guess myself personally, like some argument made upon the overall marginal utility of the actions people are doing, right? I guess that's my only personal moral philosophy that I'm talking about here, but. Like, don't listen to other people's opinions. Well, people are gonna hear people's opinions regardless. There's so many, the public square is so wide, is so wide, and at the end of the day, like especially online, kind of TOS is incredibly vague and really not particularly It's not particularly heavy-handed in the way that it deals with TOS. You can say quite a lot of shit on the Bird app and not get your tweets deleted. Anything other than that is just people disagreeing with you. Like you don't really care about everyone hearing each other's opinions. All you really care about is people hearing your opinion. In this case, that's what this whole thing belies in essence, really.
That sense, if you could elaborate a little bit more about what that means when you think that people are not listening to each other, is that your sense of what is happening?
Yes, very much so. I mean, the historians used to say about the English that we had a great ability for compromise, and that was why we were quite successful. I don't see much sign of that now. I just see a lot of groups on either side absolutely convinced that they're right, without really being interested in trying to look at the facts and the theories that are involved in these kind of decisions. And if you look at American,
literally, like half the time, I do get that there are definitely a bunch of people who don't even look at the facts before forming their opinions. I'll give you a fucking like clue. Mostly people on the right. It's mostly people on the right who don't look at any of the facts or figures with regards to these issues. Who would have fucking thought it?
now, and it's highly polarized society, you realize that people really aren't listening to each other at all, because the Trump supporters watch Fox News and get one version of the news, and other people watch other channels and get a different version of the news. They both think that the version they're getting is right, which is naive.
John, I want to ask you about your thoughts.
I mean, that is a good point, to be fair. It's literally, he's making an argument of manufactured consent here by saying that the reason why we have such a polarized society, and it's very true, is because it's specifically kind of sculpted by media narratives that want to paint people as being part of opposing groups rather than, a general, population wanting to create a cohesive society, right? Because that generates clicks. Having culture wars, having these like binary conflicts between groups of society, wanting people to kind of pin their flag to some kind of particular movement they have to be a part of to oppose something else. It is specifically used as a marketing strategy for these media corporations, not just to create our own personal brand and to create a recurring audience and to manufacture that content in that way, but it's also done to be able to distract people from lots of the times like economic issues that are going to be in the benefit of the vast majority of the population and create a more cohesive society. If we do spend too much time getting distracted by culture or bullshit like this, which you are contributing to right now, John, you're contributing to it by getting angry about people being too woke, because that's without actually properly defining what you mean by that, rather than using it as a obfuscatory term, so that you don't actually have to engage with people on the actual positions that they hold.
That's on another comedian. I don't know if you know this American comedian, Dave Chappelle, who faced a huge backlash for his comments.
We're back on cancel culture. Yes, I thought we were going to be talking about shows and comedy, but I'm not interested in doing this interview anymore. So I'll leave you now. Bye-bye.
Okay, that's your...
I mean, look, Dave Chappelle is a comedian. You said, oh, I thought we can have a discussion about comedy. Yes, Dave Chappelle is a comedian who's in a very similar situation to you. How is that not a discussion about comedy, John? Also, amusingly, the Ben Shapiro through line is continuing with the just like, this interview's over, I'm fucking leaving because you're asking too many hard questions. I'm too much of a snowflake to actually give my opinion on these issues, right? Or I didn't sign up to being asked questions that I might have to struggle to answer. I thought I was here just to use it as a promotional strategy for my upcoming comedy tour of Singapore. BBC not giving me the platform I want to be able to continuously market myself to the population, rather than using it as a critical platform to discuss issues, which is you said that you wanted to do. You said you wanted to have a discussion of the issues in this fucking interview. Someone's coming up with questions about the discussions of, that you say you want to happen, and then as soon as it does happen, you fucking walk away. It's so hypocritical. Like, I hate appealing to hypocrisy, but it's just wild that literally spend the entire interview saying we need to have a discussion about these issues. Oh, okay, well, what about it now? Do you have a discussion now? No, actually, I would rather just promote my tour, thank you. You can have a discussion on the Bird app or whatever. What fucking nightmare these people are. Interested to see our reaction.
Prerogative.
It doesn't even close the Zoom meeting either. He just takes out his headphones and walks away. Oh dear Lord, oh dear Lord. And apparently now he is going to complain to the BBC. He intends to put a formal complaint about the deception, dishonesty, and tone. Like, first of all, the tone was incredibly thin. It was so softball. It wasn't like it was like the one way it's not similar to the Andrew Neil Ben Shapiro debate discussion or whatever is that Andrew Neil was incredibly incisive with the question that he was asking, whereas this person, who conducted this particular interview, asked incredibly softball questions that were very easy for him to answer. But because he was, he didn't want to have to be able to answer difficult questions, be able to stake his claim to a position, he just walked away like a fucking coward. Jesus Christ. Journalist Karishma Vaswani had tried to portray him as old-fashioned, uncaring, and basically harmful. That's the problem. Like, as soon as these people get challenged, they then just take up the position that they think other people hold on these issues, right? It's like, well, you're trying to put me into a specific position, but all you're doing is asking clarifying questions from an alternate perspective to get him to solidify his viewpoint. Like, I don't know how it's just wild to me. It's absolutely wild. He said he was in the interview to discuss his stand-up shows in Singapore and Bangkok, but instead had been asked about why he was interested in cancel culture. Well, he's got a fucking program coming up about it. And literally, it's just this kind of fluffy idea about parents being overprotective. Like, there's a really great point in the first ContraPoints video about cancel, about the left quote unquote silencing free speech or whatever. I kind of touched upon beforehand. This idea that people from marginalized communities, they just don't know that racism and transphobia and homophobia exist, and they're just completely shielded from it by a culture that's not permissive of people being edgy enough, when it's literally fucking everywhere. We just don't want, for example, I don't know, the money that we spend on tuition fees going to pay these people speakers fees, or it coming to our certain area of the country and bringing a certain kind of caliber of individual and spreading a certain message amongst the area of society that we live in, right? Like, I wouldn't say that we should just ban Roy Chubby Brown from speaking anywhere, but if a certain venue doesn't want to host him because of the shitty things he says, then that's their fucking prerogative at the end of the day. They're a private company, do what they fucking want. Like, very, very simple. Karishma had no interest in discussion with me. She wanted only the role of prosecutor. The previously needs to train her again, which is literally, again, look, Ben Shapiro back all over again. Just talking about, well, clearly you're a leftist who was just trying to skewer me with your manufactured talking points when she was just asking clarifying questions. This is a fair and appropriate interview which touched on the topics that John Cleese had been previously vocal about, as well as themes within his new tour. If his new tour is about it as well, like if he's literally going on a tour about the questions he was being asked, then how is that in any way not the interview that he would have signed up for? Cleese blacklists himself from university, so fucking. So it was the Germans episode that was put for racial slurs, whatever. At least that clarifies it. But yeah, no, what a fucking snowflake. What a fucking thin-skinned individual who can't even carry himself through the mildest of questioning, and clarification around some of the views that he holds, which I find very, very amusing. But hey ho, that's the world we're living in, where these people just get to spout their uninformed gibberish just because they happen to be famous once in a previous life or whatever, and now they feel like they have this kind of divine right to a platform with which to opine on issues of the day, when they don't really understand or take any kind of proper nuanced discussion of with regards to these things or whatever. I mean, I don't doubt that actually, to be fair, he probably does have some nuanced opinions on these things, but we can't know what they are if you refuse to fucking answer questions on them. Unless you're just given, free space in some kind of, fucking rag to moan about it without any kind of pushback. If you want there to be a robust debate in the public discourse for people to be able to, discuss these issues from both sides of the equation, then you're going to have to deal with people who, when they're interviewing you, ask you questions that aren't that are at least somewhat difficult, which these ones weren't even that difficult regardless either. So incredibly snowflakey, incredibly fucking like lowest common denominator from him here. When, you know, if he's going to talk about the silencing of discourse, you can at least do the decency of engaging in the discourse himself rather than running away when the questions get too difficult. But hey ho, it is what it is. Oh, what else are we even going to talk about? Oh shit, by-election. The polls have closed. Let's have a look and see what's going on. Do we have any polls closed? Polls closed in North Shropshire by-election. Declaration expected overnight. Let's see if Britain Elects have posted anything. Please give me exit polls. Come on, give me some juicy information, Britain Elects. Is there an exit poll? Latest. Okay, apparently by-elections don't have exit polls. So you have to wait until the result comes through. Oh, okay. Yeah, so there's probably not going to be some kind of exit poll. Oh, apparently there's an internal Labour exit poll here saying that it looks like a Conservative hold with Labour in second, which would be fucking hilarious if this is true. I mean, it's not what I exactly want, right? Okay, so I'm gonna have a bit of a rant, to be honest. That I would like the Lib Dems to fuck off. I would really like the Lib Dems to just fuck off forever. Just go away and stop dividing the electorate upon the lines of the Conservative opposition, right? They don't do anything. They never have enough sway in Parliament to do anything. They haven't done since 2010. They don't have any particular political platform. It just seems to kind of change with regards to which seat they're contesting, right? So in some respects, they're talking about, you know, the kind of infrastructure packages that we should be seeing with regards to some kind of social democratic, you know, government moving forward. Other times they're being incredibly neoliberal and talking about new deregulation, and talking about how planning regulations in local areas are going to lead to the increase in house prices, which is just like an incredibly regressive way of looking at the way in which the housing issue of the day, which is the big thing I fucking talk about all the time. They don't have any kind of political presence online. The people who vote for them are just like endless contrarians who don't have a single tactical bone in their fucking body, right? All they do is exist to continually give Conservatives majority governments in this country. Like, we could have gotten rid of Ian Duncan Smith. Ian Duncan Smith could have been removed from Parliament by Faiza Shaheen in 2019. But the Lib Dem vote was like triple the Ian Duncan Smith majority of a Faiza Shaheen. And if for example, right, I say this a lot on the social medias where all of my leftoid friends hang out, and they always say, oh well, the Lib Dems, but they're just another Liberal Party now, they'd end up voting for the Conservatives. That's actually not true. When you look at where they've actually polled people like Liberal Democrat voters second choice, like 75% of them have Labour as their second choice. So they know as well that these are positions with which they used to have some affinity with, yet they still won't vote tactically to remove Conservative MPs in blue-red marginal seats. They sit there with their fucking 4,000 votes and continually return Conservative members to Parliament because there's just this insane vote split that goes on. They're a tiny party now at this point who get how many seats do they even have in Parliament? Um, it's not many at all. I think it's like 25 or something. Has 12. Has 12 members of Parliament in the House of Commons. That's fucking nothing. That's literally like it's not enough. It's as many as like the DUP we used to be able to prop up with the confidence and supply agreement with the Conservatives at the last election, the 2017 election. Sorry, like they've just got nobody. They don't do anything. They don't have any platform. All they are is a protest vote at this point. They're as useless as the fucking Green Party, quite frankly. And the people who support them, the fucking follow back pro EU people, are the most terminally, ridiculously unreasonable people I've ever had the misfortune of coming across. Because it's all fucking Brexit. They can't fucking shut up about it. Yes, it's bad. I agree that it's bad. It is, but it's happening now. It's not going to stop. It's not going to get turned around. No political party is going to, take on board the thrashing that they would get if they oppose the quote unquote will of the people, right? It's not just shut up about it. It's not like you can like what we should be talking about is having a structured conversation about the way in which that we be able to mitigate the poor effects of Brexit because it's not going to go away. It's not going to like that. That's the issues of our time are never gonna. The issues of Brexit are not going to be turned around by some kind of miraculous move back to the European Union, which frustratingly, I think the majority of the population do support. But unfortunately, we're at this position where the Conservatives continue having to kowtow to this group of people, and they're the biggest, there's the most powerful political party in the country. They have the massive sway to be able to force policy to be about issues like Brexit. It's not going to wait. It's going to keep being there, and just shouting about how much you hate it the whole time isn't going to fucking change that. There are real concrete issues that are facing the people of this country, like the housing crisis, like the poverty crisis, like lowering, like low wages and the concentration of wealth and climate change. And Liberal Democrats have crap policies on all of these. Jo Swinson, she was the person who was trying to say, well, we should have loans, like interest loans, for people to be able to for young people to be able to get deposits for houses. I'm just like, what is your official governmental policy going to be fucking Wonga.com? Jesus Christ, guys! What's frustrating is that I don't necessarily, especially in the days of like Charles Kennedy, who was a staunchly anti-war candidate. He was great. The Lib Dems were a great party then. They were opposing the neoliberal order of, the Blairites in charge of New Labour at the time. And they did a really good job. And he'd be spinning in his fucking grave if he saw the state of the party now, campaigning in conservative seats, trying to beat them off the back of, or from the right on housing policy. When they claim to care about the fact that the housing market is fucked for young people, and then literally don't even bother trying to oppose policies that make it even worse as well. They're just like the middle class Liberal Party, like the party of middle class liberals who they should know better. These are the kind of people who are politically engaged enough to know that it's a protest vote, to know that they're gifting Conservatives majority every fucking election, right? If they were a larger party and they had a bigger sway in Parliament or whatever, and there were more seats that they had, which were in some way kind of marginal with the Conservatives, I wouldn't even care that much. Because at least reducing the number of Conservative seats overall makes it harder for them to form a majority government, because the SNP are never going to ally with them, whereas they could theoretically ally with the Lib Dems and Labour on those kind of issues. So if you reduce Conservative seats, they're less likely to get asked to form a government in the case of a hung parliament. Like, I get that. But you're so tiny, you're so minuscule, Liberal Democrats are just such a non-existent force in this country that they just exist to play spoiler. And if they just went away, there would be no conservative. Excuse me, sorry. There just wouldn't be any conservative majority governments anymore. And I would much rather have some kind of level of proportional representation. I understand that's going to take us further away from socialism, right? I get that. I understand that. It's frustrating for me to admit that we need single party control over the government to be able to return the transformative policies that I want to be able to see to create some kind of social democratic socialist society, which I think is the most reasonable to expect to happen in a short period of time, right? But that's never going to happen in like the multi-party system we have at the moment, where votes are split down so many different fucking factional lines. And once you just admit that, and we had the vote, people rejected the alternative vote proposals done by the coalition government, or whatever it was. People rejected that. We're not going to have it. We're not going to have a reform to the voting system, at least anytime soon. But I do think it's fairer to have a proportional representative system, even if that does make it harder to have a strong governmental force with which to create transformative change to society, which makes it even more fucking frustrating that when Blair had this massive majority, he had this massive mandate to make huge changes, sweeping changes to make this country a better place, he did fucking nothing with it. Like, sure, I mean, there was the nationalising of NatWest or whatever, NatWest PLC, NatWest Group, and some changes to SureStart or whatever, and these kind of general third way social programs he did. But he could have changed society radically for the better, but he's done nothing that can just be rolled back by the next Conservative government, which they fucking did. And in a post Blair world, where a post 2015 world where the Democrats got fucking eviscerated, and quite rightly too, because they essentially gave the Conservatives a blank check to be able to do whatever they wanted in government by giving them the legitimacy of the cabinet. Because apparently in Nick Clegg's memoirs, he said that there were some things that they opposed the government on, but they wouldn't have had to be in the position to have to oppose them if you'd not gone to coalition with them in the fucking first place. Like, if you'd have tried to build a coalition with Labour and you'd been able to actually have built something which there was at least some way in which you kind of shared those values. But that didn't happen with the Conservatives. It was just like this, we're going to give them power, but sort of somewhat mitigate them. And they got destroyed at the ballot box. And quite rightly they got destroyed at the ballot box. And nowadays, they don't have any kind of proper policy platform with which to care about. Ed Davey is basically a fucking non-entity. I mean, Jo Swinson was a non-entity as well, but that's by the by. She lost her fucking seat. Yeah, screw you. They just need to go away. Even like, not from like a purity perspective. It was because I want Keir Starmer to go from a purity perspective, right? But even from a pragmatic perspective, all they do is play spoiler. All they do is just return Conservative government after Conservative government after Conservative government. They just need to disappear. Like, it's not. And the sad part is, in the days of the STP, like, maybe I could gather some kind of level of wanting to oppose, like any kind of Labour opposition that you don't think held the kind of right position. But especially in an age of Keir Starmer, the difference in kind of policy platform of the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party is fucking minuscule at this point. They're just two liberal parties now. There's no reason for you to exist. Just go. Just go. Just either commit to a position of supporting the Conservatives or supporting Labour, and realise that in the first past the post system that we have right now, there is just no room for you to exist. All you do is return Conservative government after Conservative government, and you need to admit that that's what you've done. And like, that as a party who was supposed to oppose Brexit as an entity, the position that they have held in consequence has led to a worse Brexit happening, which I find fucking hilarious. But, them's just the breaks, unfortunately. Fortunately, first past the post is a garbage system. So even if this was back in the days of Charles Kennedy, when you had a party that I actually believed in the platform of, and I believed in the positions that they espoused, even if that was still the case, they still would not be, a reasonable force for good at this point. Or the actual, like, marginal utility of the existence of the Liberal Democrats as a party is basically nothing. Just go. Just stop it. Just leave. There's no point in you existing anymore. Please just leave. Idiots. Have a look. Is there anything that we can react Andy to? Oh, they just uploaded the Politics Live from yesterday. I wish I'd watched that instead. I can't watch Vorsh content. I'm on Twitch. I get banned. Can't watch Vorsh or Hassan or Fawn. Fucking hell. I guess I should probably give my take. I should probably give my take on the Slur discourse that's been happening. So people who don't know, famous streamers Ian Vorsh Kaczynski and Hassan Hasanabi Piker and Fawn, who has no real name. He's just a ephemeral creature of Twitch. Got banned for saying cracker on stream in varying ways. Actually, Fawn got banned for using it in chat, right? After Hassan's mods got banned for saying the word cracker. Now, a lot of discourse has been happening about this, so I guess I better throw my hat in the ring with regards to this issue as well. Now, I think the Vorsh is correct in that it is technically a slur. Like, if you're using a slur issue, we should just have a definition that is as easy to be able to put forward as possible, which is just that a slur that is used as a derogatory term to refer to someone based upon some level of immutable characteristic should probably be characterized as a slur. So the C slur and the N slur or whatever, these are things that you know that like these are definitely our slurs, and Twitch has every right to want to go ahead and enforce their terms of service in a way that they feel protects their brand or whatever, right? The fact that there's a bunch of rightoids on the platform that are saying that it's somehow the council culture people's chickens coming home to roost is if we're not just like, oh, okay, so they've been banned for saying this, right? Well, that's Twitch following their TOS. We can still disagree with the way in which they are doing their TOS, right? Which I think is fair enough, because I believe that, there's no specific list of words that you can or can't say on Twitch as a broadcaster. So having some kind of list of things that would at least give people an idea of what they can and can't say definitively would make things a lot easier and would lead to fewer situations like this where people didn't know exactly what they can or couldn't say, got outraged about it when it did happen, and then led to further bans down the line. That doesn't make life good for anybody if you don't have a definitive list of what you can and can't say, and it's very nebulous, which is what the Twitch TOS is right now. So I get people's frustration with that, but the point of view that people like someone like Hassan is making this issue is saying, well, cracker doesn't have any kind of systemic oppression behind it, so it's not a slur that has any kind of real world harm. So it's ridiculous that I got banned for it. And I'm just like, well, tough shit. Like, when Twitch was started banning your moderators for it, you should have realized that this was this was a warning sign for you to not say it yourself. So you only have yourself to blame. Like, even like in the Washington Post article about it, Vorsh even said that Twitch had been cornered into it by Hassan's actions. It's like, I get it, right? It doesn't have any kind of weight behind it in the way that the N slur does. Not anywhere close, right? Obviously, I think most people would agree with that. Most white people don't even care about being called the Cleese slur, sorry. They don't even give a shit about it. The vast majority of people don't. Who are white. I don't care about it. But if you're going to have a policy where you just say, well, slurs based on immutable characteristics are bad, then that stands to reason that you'd want to get rid of both. Like, if you're going to say something about, if the Twitch TOS was specifically about words that could theoretically be used in the context of larger systemic oppression, then the Twitch TOS would fucking say that, wouldn't it? Right? So the whole discourse is just wild from kind of both sides, apart from amusingly, Vorsh, who seems to have the most kind of level-headed attitude with regards to this issue, where he's saying like, yeah, I think it's a slur, I don't think it's racist, at least not systemically racist either, and I think it's funny that I got banned for it. We win some, you lose some. I'm still going to stream on YouTube, which, fair enough. Like, if one of these platforms won't let you say the slurs you want to say, move to a different fucking platform. Very few people are actually offended by this term cracker. Oh, sorry. Sorry, no, I mean the C slur. I'll get myself fucking banned now, aren't I? Fucking hell. I have to delete this font afterwards. At least I've managed to get loads of this recorded. Most people don't even care about being called the C slur if you're white, right? No one really cares. But, if you want to say that, Go to fucking YouTube. Go to D Live. There's plenty of platforms you can go to where you can say these things with impunity, which isn't really the case with regards to Twitch. And Twitch are very welcome to do so. And Hassan even makes a good point by saying that the reason why he chose Twitch as a platform specifically is because he thinks that the terms of service they have in place are the best at protecting people in general. I agree. I think that having a TOS that does protect people is a good idea. But then when you get bitten on the arse by it, you can't really cry foul, as Hassan has done and Vorsh hasn't, and Fawn hasn't done either. Although even though what Fawn did was incredibly minor, she was just asking about the discourse and the slur that was being used in question in Chud Logic's chat, and she got banned for that. Like, she was just asking about the word that was being used. She wasn't using it at somebody. She wasn't using it specifically to refer to somebody's immutable characteristic. She was just asking about the word being the word and its usage in abstract. So that if anyone has the right to complain about being banned in this instance, it's Fawn, and it's definitely not it's not Vorsh, and 100% definitely not Hassan from this position, right? So I genuinely don't know how he can have any kind of issue with the ban that's been placed upon him, because I agree with him on the vast majority of the other things that he says, and it doesn't have the historical weight to it that the end slur does. Like, there's no systemic actual racism going on against white people at the moment in the United States of America or whatever. Like, I get it. I 100% agree with that. But here's the thing. There's a lot of leftoids online who just want to say things like this to be edgy. It's just like kind of an edgy thing that you can get away with if you're on the left, right? By just saying, like being kind of performatively anti-white for clout, which isn't, like, being anti-white isn't like a real thing. It's not the same with that rightly people say that anti-whiteness is some kind of societal contagion that's going around. But you're not making that discourse any better by playing into that stereotype, right? If you're going, if you know and you understand, because we all understand at this point, the amount of people are saying now, oh, the left just hate white people, the left just hate men, the left just hate cis people. If you're continually going around saying all these things, etc., etc., if they're saying all these things, why would you immediately play into the stereotype by saying, well, yeah, I hate men and I hate white people? Like, what do you do other than sour the discourse and make it impossible to be able to bring people over to your side of the equation? It's so like optically toxic. Just think, like, you don't need to say the C slur. You don't need to do it. Just a minor moderation in your language would allow you to have far more constructive conversations about the kind of the racial animus that's happening in America and the life in which black people face. Because at the end of the day, you're kind of centering yourself here. You're kind of centering yourself as somebody by talking about, the discourse that's happening around the C slur and what white people think about it, rather than the actual discussion that we should be having, which is about systemic racism in the United States and in the UK. This is like the material and tangible effect that this has, and we can't have that conversation if we continue getting stunlocked by fucking inane discussions about white people being called a certain slur on fucking Twitch by fucking Hassan. It's so ridiculous that this discussion is even going on. And I'm glad that at least somebody like Vorsh is just said, oh yeah, I got banned for it, or whatever, that's fine, I'll stream on YouTube, continue to do that, who cares, right? Because at least he understands the positions that other people hold on this issue, and he admitted that it is a slur. He admitted it doesn't have the same weight that the end slur does, but he'll continue to use it, but he doesn't think it does much harm. Like, I think that you don't gain anything from using it, but I don't think it cause much harm either. I think it's left a bad taste in people's mouths because minorities get the stuff all the time, and it seems like white people's feelings are constantly prioritized. I mean, you're absolutely 100% correct there, So Vane. I absolutely 100% agree with you on that issue. But I'm still thinking about, like, the optical nature and, like, the actual marginal utility of saying these things yourself anyway. It doesn't help anybody to say the C slur, so why bother? Like, what do you gain from it? But really, we should have a wide discussion about the way in which Twitch culture deals with people of racial minorities or gender and sexual minorities as well. Like, Twitch have put in, like, good things that you can do now to be able to protect against hate raids, but that's not going to change the culture in general. It's just going to push people to side. We need to have a discussion about the way of changing the culture to make it better, rather than just having endless like circular discussions about terms of service and what Twitch should be doing or whatever, and what words you can and can't say, rather than the ways in which we ameliorate racial disparities, both on Twitch, in the public sphere, and and with regards to public policy. So yeah, incredibly silly discourse, which I'm not going to spend much more time talking about, because I know all of my other favorite streamers have all done segments about it as well. But it is what it is. I've kind of talked about everything I wanted to talk about today. Let's see if there's anything coming up on my YouTube subs that we can just react to. I don't feel like I produced anything good enough to put on YouTube with this stream. That's frustrating. Been live for like 2 hours, just not getting any good content out of it. Oh, communism. It's the ideology I align closest with, but I don't have any kind of specific prescriptions with regards to that. I'm not like somebody who places a huge amount of particular weight on what kind of like leftist idea that I think is the best or most specific one I want to aim for, or a specific kind of strategy. I like things that make things more leftist, and I dislike things that don't. That's my point of view. I'm not gonna say here that thinking that I'm not gonna sit around here and continue opining about how anarchists are cringe, or how Leninism is like authoritarian or whatever. If things are going to make society more leftist, then whatever strategy works, right? And I will call out specific actions about whether I think they're good or not based on their own merits. And whether it's a market, or like a market system, or a plan system, or something Soviet or Chinese or Vietnamese or whatever, or Yugoslavian, I don't really mind about how these we get towards these ends. But as long as people are looking at something through some like a level of a Marxist analysis of the systems that are going on, that's what I really care about. Looking at things outside of this liberal, individualized, fucking Thatcherist lens, the woke Thatcherism that Chud keeps talking about. So that's mostly what I care about. Looking at things through a Marxist perspective. I'm not really fussed about, what particular brand of leftism I purport to subscribe to, for example. Well, I do think that the best example. Hey, you're from Yugoslavia, excellent. I do think that the best example of a socialist society that we have seen on planet Earth was in the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia during Tito's reign. I think that was the happiest and freest and most prosperous we've seen a socialist nation in history. Because there was political repression, but it was basically only if you said anything against, if you were either any specifically nationalist in any way, or if you said bad shit about the CPY. It's not like China where everything is where there's lots of political repression, right? So Yugoslavia was free based. We should use that to be able to work on moving forward, which is why, even though a bunch of kind of cringy people talk about market socialism's a thing, like the Yugoslav model worked well and allowed people to have autonomy over their own lives and their own workplaces, and it created a kind of worker state, which I definitely agree with. So that's fair. That's fair. Whereabouts in Yugoslavia is your heritage from? Obviously, I know there's a lot of ethnic tension that goes on in that area of the world. So was there a hippy dippy panel that I can watch? That's fair. Serbian makes a lot of sense. I mean, let me see if we can find the VOD for last week's hippy dippy and then watch that debate. It seems like a pretty interesting one. That's pretty cringy. There's a pretty cringy conservative cuck on there. This one I'm
Would
looking
you
for?
be
Oh, an abortion. Oh, God, no. Why abortion debate? Why, Dylan? Why? Ugh. Do I really have to watch an abortion debate? An Oxford school tragedy? It's got Loner Box, though. I love me some Loner Box. Right, fuck it. We'll do it. We'll watch some hippy dippy. Let's watch some fucking hippy dippy. There's nothing else for me to watch, so let's do it.
willing to pay more in taxes to fix that system, to provide for the healthcare and for the taking care of children up until the age of 18? Because that's what we're going to have to do.
Very interesting question.
That's
what I
actually
would
a tax. That's a tax I would support. That's honestly
Okay,
what I would support.
Secondly, I would say, would you support the implementation of comprehensive sex education in all schools so that people know how to prevent getting pregnant, people know how to protect themselves, people know how to prevent abuse, prevent rape, prevent themselves from getting pregnant?
Now, maybe this is my ignorance, but I did learn that in school. Our school taught that. So if it's not taught nationwide, then maybe it should be yes.
It's not. It's not. There are areas where it's abstinence only. Abstinence only actually leads to higher rates of teen pregnancy in the areas.
I am a minister. I do not push abstinence only. I am not naive. I came to ministry later on. I was a teenager. I know that abstinence only isn't going to work. But I do agree with health classes teaching protection and all the other stuff that you were saying.
Okay, so you agree with higher taxes?
Holy shit, when did Dylan update his camera? It's got a fucking DSLR setup now. It looks way better than it used to. But I'm still stuck using my phone as my camera, so.
And with earlier comprehensive sex education.
Well, Kevin Castley's fucking like hawk takes on Twitter was so fucking cringe. He has a list that he like had where he thinks that some people are Russian assets, right? And get this, so it includes on this list Ilhan Omar, Kyle Kalinske, Tucker Carlson, and Max Blumenthal. He thinks these are all just somehow like being paid off by the Kremlin. The guy's fucking mental. Like his brain is just like broken. Just a fucking like just another fucking liberal.
Yeah, I agree that with that tax. But I also agree there's a lot of other taxes we can cut.
And do you we need to bring up. Okay. I don't have any more questions at this point.
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Brant from Brant for Liberty. I am a crowdsourced media React Andy. I react to a lot of things that are going on internationally as well domestically. I'm ready for a spirit-filled debate. I see a few new faces that I have not met. Nice to meet everyone here, and like I said, I'm looking forward to a really good conversation.
Wonderful. Now we're going to throw it to a new guest, Mr. Green Zerg.
Yeah, my name's Nick. You can call me Nick. You can also call me Green Zerg if you want. I streamed for about a year. I mostly just played D&D with a guy called Koibu. I'm in a campaign with Destiny at the moment. This is kind of my first foray into the online debate sphere, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Good luck. I'll throw it over to James.
Mellow greetings, everybody. My name is James. I'm from the internet. I host a YouTube series called Left of Left, and I broadcast here on Twitch most afternoons and evenings.
Next, we're going to throw it over to Lonerbox.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Lonerbox, most toxic streamer on Twitch. Also make YouTube videos.
And he's British. Next, we're going to throw it over to Preacher.
How you doing? Preacher570 here on Twitch. I do Monday through Friday. I do a show In My Humble Opinion, and I'm on TikTok now at Preacher570. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a good debate. Some of you guys I know, some of you guys I don't, so it'll be interesting. I do.
You have a TikTok. What do you post on TikTok?
Actually, I try to keep my politics off of there and just have fun.
Got you. Okay. We're going to throw it now over to Stardust.
Yet.
Very great opinion, Stardust.
Informative.
Okay, Kevin Gasley.
The overtones of her voice are amazing.
Fuck.
There you go.
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. I'm so sorry. Okay, first off, fuck everybody here. Okay, I'm Stardust. I stream on Twitch. I'm the
You've missed the very short amount of slur discourse that I went, which is basically just like, see, slur, not particularly racist, but is a slur. Twitch can have the TOS they want. If you get banned, it's your fault. But I like it doesn't obviously it's not like a particularly like harmful term. I don't think, as you know, from an overall kind of societal lens, but it's going to make things worse if you keep using it, because then all these fucking blah blah anti-racist code for anti-white are just going to use it as a position to use it as a reason to not engage with your argument. So like, I don't think there's any real harm in using it like individually to people, but I don't think it's good for the discourse for us to just continue to be permissive of it.
fastest rising villain in Twitch politics, and everybody can go get fucked. Okay, I'm here 7 days a week.
Wonderful. Now we're going to throw it over now. She also has called me a wet towel, so she's a scoundrel.
I have called you a wet towel. I'm so sorry about that. You're a dry towel. I'm so sorry.
Very mean. I'm going to throw it over to Kevin Casley.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. Great to be here. So I'm Kevin Casley. I run the channel Superpower Broadcasting. I stream every day, every week to Twitch. And I, as those who follow me will know, I just got my YouTube channel back after 89-day copyright battle against fascists who spanned my channel with frivolous copyright. YouTube sided with me. So we're back, baby. So you can subscribe to me on YouTube as well. Hot Gang, Liberal Hawk, Feminism, Liberal World Order, all that good stuff. Great to be here. Thank you.
You forgot Gangnam Style.
Gangnam Style, all that stuff, yeah.
Thank you very much. And congratulations on getting your channel back.
Thanks, Dylan. And I appreciate, you reaching out to me and everything when that happened, because that was some nuts drama that happened in my, neck of the politosphere, so.
No worries, man. I love the beard. Now we're throwing it over to a new guest never been on before, Doghouse Show.
What was that, Dylan?
I don't remember the little people.
All right, so here's the thing. First of all, I'm the Doghouse Show. I stream once every 6 months. I was the person who made IRI. I'm the person who made Frames. And Dylan, I was gonna exclude you from that. Damn, man, how you gonna do that to me? Look, I stream once every 6 months. I don't know what to really say. I'm the Doghouse Show. Rough. Let's get to this shit, bro. Let's do it.
You're one of two dog-centered channels now. Doghouse, Wolfpack, very correlated. Okay.
No, not together. We separate.
We're separate. Conservatives have always been advocates of separate but equal. Now we're going to go into the first topic. But first let me get into the rules. So the first rule is nothing TOS. We would like to all keep our jobs, and I would like to keep mine. So nothing against terms of service. The second rule is that we will treat people with respect when it comes to immutable characteristics. That means you don't go after people's race. That means you don't go after people for being a woman or a man, and all of those types of things. You also, I don't care what you do on your own channels, but you're going to gender people how they would want to be gendered here. That's a rule that I have in place. If you don't like it, you can always go to a different panel show. I hear Infrared is hiring. So is anybody confused about any of those rules? No, wonderful. One last thing. If you have a difficulty moving into the panel discussion because, there's 8 people trying to talk, raise your hand. I am in LA at the moment, so I do not have my handy, nifty notebook, but I'll try to make a mental note of it. I'll do my best. Or I'll just bring up a notepad in one of my many screens that Wicked Supreme has provided for me today. Any confusion? Wonderful. So we're going to go into the first topic. It is kind of a sleeper a little bit. Roe versus Wade. So Roe versus Wade has gone into the national conversation again as the Supreme Court is hearing a testimony on the future of Roe versus Wade as the nation then once again debates Roe versus Wade. Of course, the question of is abortion moral or immoral, or what the legal status of abortion should be in this country, has gone on for decades as pro-lifers and pro-choicers have battled it out, not only legally and in the court system and judicially on the state and national level, but also on the streets with protest. And so my question is, what is your view on Roe versus Wade and the current discussion going around Roe versus Wade? I'm leaving it purposely vague so you can start wherever you want with the conversation. I'm going to start with Brant for Liberty in the top left-hand corner.
I know, pass me the ball first here. Okay, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. That way we can have a lot of time to volley back and forth. Even though I personally, in my own household, am pro-life, I would never interfere with what another state voted in as a policy. I do not believe in a federal stance on this. I think it should be left up to the states. And we can argue the gray area of where conception ends and personhood begins. But as far as that, I like to stick to me and mine and not try to rule another state for which I'm not even paying taxes in or involved in their communities. I trust their constituents, and that's basically my 2 cents on it.
Wonderful. Now we're going to throw it over to, what was Greenzerg? What was it that I could call you by?
Nick.
Okay, throw it over to Nick.
Well, thank you. All right, also trying to keep it short and sweet. I'm trying to approach, I think there's a lot of great arguments for why abortion should be legal, but I'm going to go for one that maybe appeals to some people on the right. So I think the previous decision in Roe versus Wade established a certain amount of liberties for women, i.e. the right to bodily autonomy or privacy as it's described in the legislation. That's something that's been granted to 50% of the population. If you want to roll that back, fetus maybe outweighs the woman's right to bodily autonomy. If you want to move that line earlier, you've got to have a very compelling reason to do so. And I've yet to hear a great argument from anyone on the right as to why that should be moved back, why those liberties should be taken away. And most of the arguments I hear are appeals to feelings and or religion.
Okay, we're going to now throw it over to James.
Not a big fan of any individual being forced to be a breeding sow because the state says they're not allowed to have a medical procedure of their choice. The state is pretty much trash. The Supreme Court is pretty much trash. And I'm going to close with people shouldn't be breeding sows just because you like an invisible dude floating in the sky who's surrounded by dead flying babies playing harps. Thank you.
We're now going to throw it over to Preacher.
Well, I fucking hate these kind of cringe, like, atheist takes on this shit. Like, I get you. I agree with you on that particular issue. But you just, like, you're not convincing anyone. You sound like a dickhead. Like, come off it. Just talk about, like, the actual rights of the people involved rather than just, like, mocking people for being religious.
Yeah, I agree with Brant. I do not believe the federal government has the should be delving into each state and instead leave this up to a state's option. I do believe that Roe versus Wade is the single most damaging decision when it comes to women's mental health and life in general. I think considering a woman a breeding sow when it was her decision to lay down and have sexual relations is completely out of line. But I mean, we can call women sows if we want to. I choose not to. That's just my personal choice, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Lonerbox.
Yeah, first of all, Americans, but you know, I guess like this kind of conversation can go in all kinds of directions, like whether it's going to become a weird abstract conversation about the philosophy of where life begins and et cetera, or we can talk about, I think maybe the personal liberty argument that Brant gave was maybe a bit of a cop-out, like the federal government can't hit people's bodily autonomy, but the states can. I feel like that's a really arbitrary distinction that isn't really, I don't know why you would make that. I can maybe just throw out like my very simple take on it is that there is
It's incredibly frustrating when you do get those arguments because it's like, just please, I'm begging people to just like make a normative claim saying, well, I believe that I stand by the Constitution that says that the federal government can't do this, the states can, because that's the structure of the United States. So I'm like, okay, I get that's the structure of the United States. I get that you believe that, but no, do you think the states should be outlawing these things? Right? Make a normative claim. Do you think it's good or bad? Right? And they won't stake a claim to it because they're too busy, fucking masturbating with a copy of the Constitution they've got.
no such thing as a pro-life position. There's a pro-birth position. And even if all the people who call themselves pro-life actually did support things like support for childcare and for young mothers and family planning, all that, then even if that were the case, then you still have the issue where you have a child who's born to a family that didn't want them. That's not pro-life, that's pro-birth.
Okay, next is going to be the Doghouse Show.
All right, so typically I try to avoid these conversations because they become extremely toxic. However, I am on the panel and I will give my initial opinion. Honestly, I'll see where it goes. I'm gonna hold my cards close to me. I just think that honestly, this conversation typically is gonna go one of two ways. We're either gonna see people talking about the morality of things, whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing. We're then gonna see something about where does life start. We're gonna hear conversations about all sorts of things. We'll see where it goes. I have a feeling we're gonna deviate away from the actual conversation of Roe v. Wade. I'm pretty certain we all know how this is gonna go. This conversation is as old as Roe v. Wade itself, even older than that, 1856 to be precise. But anyways, we'll see how this goes. But I have low expectations. So.
Okay, Kevin Glassley.
Thanks, Alan. So basically, with this situation here, I think it's proof positive that elections matter. Had Hillary Clinton won in 2016, this wouldn't really be the debate topic right now. This is happening because Donald Trump was able to appoint a bunch of conservative justices, and you know what? That's his.
He literally cannot let it fucking go. This guy has a massive fucking boner for Hillary Clinton. I'm like, well, she didn't win because she fucking sucked because she's a garbage candidate, right? If Bernie Sanders had won in 2016, that would also have been the case. But Hillary Clinton was the one who ran and the one who fucking lost. Get the fuck over it.
Right, he won the election. That's what happens, and elections matter. So the lesson there is, it's going to take a long time to overturn and everything. But if you're in the United States, I'd hope that you would support reproductive rights, right? So because the Supreme Court in the U.S. is not actually impartial or just reading the Constitution, ultimately is political one way or the other. And in this case, 6-3, not very good odds. But I will say, if men could get pregnant, this wouldn't even be a debate as well. It just simply wouldn't be a debate. Abortion would just be a right at that point. And it's not about scripture. It's not about morals. It's about controlling women. So I hope that Roe versus Wade would be upheld. I don't think it will be, though, given the Constitution of the Supreme Court currently. Thank you.
Okay, and Stardust. Again.
Sorry. Okay, resident Sal here. So if we want to approach this from like a family perspective, there have been studies done on what the results are when women are turned away from an abortion. One of those things is that when women are turned away from an abortion, they are more likely to experience economic hardship and years later are still having trouble paying for basic living expenses. Also on top of that, women who aren't allowed to get an abortion are more likely to stay with a violent partner and thus exposing their existing offspring as well as their unborn offspring to violence in the home. They're less likely to have maternal bonding with their child that they have been denied to get an abortion. I'm sure there are a whole other array of things that I could pull up. I think that honestly being pro-choice is going to be better off in the long run if you are somebody who is pro-family. I don't see how you can see the greater, broader societal effects of these issues and not take a pro-choice stance on this.
Okay, obviously.
Also,
oh, sorry.
My favorite like statistic about abortion is the first chapter in I think it's the forward even in the original Freakonomics, where they talk about how like crime was always spiraling out of control in the 90s, and then like a sudden year happened, and then the crime rate just kind of started plummeting out of nowhere. It was just like there was 18 years after Roe versus Wade, so all the people, all the kids that would have been born into poverty, whose parents couldn't properly take care of them, would end up being more likely to be criminals. These people were all kids who just ended up getting aborted, right? Which I think is a very funny statistic. I don't know the veracity of the claim, but it's funny.
Sorry.
No, you can do it.
I would ask. I always want to ask, especially when it's a lot of males around, if you had the ability to get pregnant, would you like to experience that? I guess that experience of growing something inside you and giving birth to it. I guess.
You mean if it was only a man that could get pregnant instead of a woman, or if either could?
If either could get pregnant, if you could share that responsibility with your partner, would you want to carry that?
Purely from a selfish point of view, I don't think I would. I mean, I think maybe if you were in a loving, committed relationship and you really wanted a child, perhaps then you would agree to share the burden. But I agree with you. It's easy for men to sit here and critique the rights of women to have an abortion when they don't have to go through it themselves.
Okay.
I think there's a really easy parallel you can draw to that. There was
Okay. I'm sorting my panels in different ways. So somebody who wants to start us off, could they raise their hand? That's how we're going to start off every topic so it isn't a mess. Okay, well, start us. Guess you can start off then.
Yeah. So I guess this is more like a thought experiment that I have, right? When I ask, like, would you, if the technology were available to you, would you want to carry a child for 9 months? Would you elect to do that for your partner? Let's say if it were a high-risk pregnancy for her.
I would do it in a heartbeat. Because I love my wife. Yeah, unconditionally, I would do it without even questioning it.
I think not only would I do it, but I would also do it for what the reason Brandt's given, but also to be able to experience that. And I know it's painful. I obviously don't know the pain, although I've been told a man having a cold is probably equal to the same as a woman in labor. But anyway, I know it's painful, but to experience that, bringing the life into the world, I would do it for that purpose too. And maybe that's a little bit selfish, but I don't know.
I think that's very interesting. I think it's an interesting question to put out there because we talk about what it's like to have to make that type of decision, right? But I think that it's interesting to think about what if you were the one who's growing that, right? And you found out, let's say, very late term in your pregnancy that this was going to be an unviable pregnancy, right? I've heard stories of women who have to get the very late term abortions, and the ones that I've heard have been because of medical reasons, and it's heartbreaking for them because they did want that child, but they had to.
Yeah, certainly. So, first off, from my understanding of how I've listened to Roe v. Wade, Casey, and some other things like that,
it really is quite easy for them to respond and just say, "Oh yeah, I know, I absolutely would, 100%, definitely," because it's just entirely theoretical. Then you have to face the question.
This was discussed. In fact, in Roe v. Wade, they discussed cases of rape as well. And in those discussions, they said even though with Roe v. Wade, it came from a Texas statute, and they tried talking about if we upheld your statute, what about cases of rape? And they admitted, they said, look, if you upheld it, obviously we would it wouldn't exclude rape. However, there are cases where if there is a rape, that usually gets handled immediately, and that handling is typically through the way of an abortion. I don't think I've seen
the issue with all of these people who say that they would ban abortion except in cases of rape is that then you have to have this burden of proof to have something be defined as rape, which I'm assuming will almost certainly happen in these cases. Would be that it'd be incredibly difficult. It's already incredibly difficult to get rape convictions, and unless you have that rape conviction, like the amount of people who would then stop you having abortion unless you have that conviction in the first place, which is already very difficult to get. So not only do we have very difficult for women who are raped to get justice in those cases, is they would then make it doubly difficult for them to be able to terminate the pregnancy that would become of that particular instance of rape in the first place, right? So it's just completely unworkable on both particular regards, even if that was the pro-life position that you did take.
very many abortion laws that are, and in fact, Roe v. Wade upholds this, right? Which is the fact of the 3 trimesters, right? And they say at the 3rd trimester, really, the state's interest is highest. I think it's highest, where it should be a concern between the doctor and the mother of this decision because it is such late term. This is why we have the viability at 24 weeks. The Mississippi law, that is what is stirring up all this conversation, is based on the 15 weeks. So what they're talking about in the Supreme Court case that's going on right now is lowering the viability limit from 24 weeks to 15 weeks. So there's a lot of discussion there.
Still almost.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so there's discussion, and during the court proceedings, they asked I think it's like Center for Reproductive Rights and the U.S. Solicitor General, they asked them, I think it was Thomas, Justice Thomas asked, hey, what's the difference between lowering it from 24 to 15, or what's the difference between increasing it from 24 to 27? And they gave some answers, such as like, an undue burden, essentially. But I would say this, that what would end up happening, in essence, if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, it would go pre-Roe v. Wade, essentially. I don't see that happening per se, but we'll see. But what it would do is it would leave it up to the states. I don't think, in my personal opinion, that one, women would be held to jail. First and foremost, I don't believe that to be the case. I think it'd be doctors that would be held most liable in this situation, civilly and criminally. The third is I think that you would see exceptions like these where, in cases of rape, in cases of third trimester, these options would still be there. And this was discussed, like I said, all the way back in Roe v. Wade. So it's just something to keep in mind. I mean, I don't think you would see anybody who's opposed to, like, hey, a third trimester, if it's important and it's medically, these things have to be weighed. Who gets the priority?
yeah.
And I think in this case, it's the mother.
Well, I see what you're saying, but the only reason I bring up the third trimester is because that seems to be something that a lot of people bring up, but they don't seem to have a full understanding of why these abortions happen so late, right? It's not that the person who's getting the abortion late term in the third trimester didn't want that child. They did, but that it's just not medically viable. So
if we take out the whole rape and incest, and I'm not invalidating that in any way, shape, or form, but if we take out the rape and incest and the medical issues, which are the lowest percentages of reasons given for abortion, and we go with the top percentage, which is not prepared, not ready, not wanting to have a child yet, to me, and maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but that is the epitome of lacking self-accountability. And nobody wants to address that. We want to address, like, well, men shouldn't speak on this, men shouldn't. Listen. All right, so I'm going to ask Kevin, because, or Superpower, sorry, because you had said in the opening that, okay, you said men can't have babies. My question to you would you be willing to say that to the LGBTQ community?
I know what you're doing here. It's a cute little political tactic. No, it's a Steven Crowder type tactic. I get it. I know what you're doing. No. Here's the thing, preacher. Look, let's just be real about something. I want to address something at large here, which is that regardless of the decision here upheld by the Supreme Court, regardless of what the law is on paper, abortions are going to happen in America. They're going to happen in red states and blue states. The issue is, if you overturn Roe v. Wade, you overturn that precedent, and you set it to the states, guess what? If you're in a red state and you need an abortion, that abortion's going to happen. And guess what? A lot of women are going to die in unsanitary conditions. So this idea of, it's pro-life or whatever is bullshit. And additionally, just to close here, I want to be very clear about something as well, which is that when it comes down to this, you can say it's about freedom of choice, all that kind of stuff. Oh, you can move to a blue state or whatever. The fact of the matter is, in the United States right now, over 80% of people cannot, and this includes even some people that make a lot of money but spend it. A lot of people cannot afford even a $400 emergency bill, never mind afford to move to another state. So guess what? A lot of people are going to be trapped in places like Florida, Texas, Kansas, and elsewhere. And a lot of those women, especially women in these sorts of conditions, are not financially able to move to other states. So what you've done is essentially signed off, morally at least, on the death warrant of tens of thousands of women over the next decade that will die in unsanitary conditions having abortions. You haven't stopped abortion. You haven't stopped abortion. You've just made it unsafe.
So here's the thing. When you outlaw abortion,
Can you give me one moment? I just want to make sure that was.
I mean, my tablet is freaking at me. Like he's a liberal. Like, on a bunch of social issues, he's fine. He's good. Like, he has reasonable takes about like LGBT issues, women's issues, race issues, whatever. Absolutely fine. Any common garden liberal, brilliant. Then you start having like discussions about foreign policy, and he turns into a fucking maniac. He literally goes off the fucking deep end. And like, when you try and talk to him about like any kind of like economic reform, he just like anything outside of like the Democratic Party, he looks at you like you've just fucking killed his children. So he's just like liberal brain poison, like the personification.
Back and forth with Preacher. I'll put your name now next to us. I just want to make sure Preacher can respond.
I just wanted to, I'm not being a smartass when I say this. I don't understand what you mean by putting tens of thousands, being in a red state means they have a better chance of dying or whatever it is you're saying. I don't understand that.
Like the clothes hangers, all those sorts of memes. You haven't seen that stuff? Yeah. You don't know that women are going to get abortions?
So they have a propensity to commit criminal acts, is what you're saying. Because at that point,
abortions are going to happen. So why not make it safe?
No, I'm not
If you know how the female anatomy works, it's not hard to figure out how to use a wire coat hanger.
No, we will have every other reason other than, hey, maybe have a little bit of self-control.
Yeah, well, guess what? That's easy for you to say, Preacher. You're a male, dude. You're a fucking man. Like you were saying, you're never going to have that experience. Guess what? You're in a position of privilege here, and you're trying to uphold what is literally from the patriarchy. This is literally you trying to uphold the classic patriarchy, essentially.
No, what it is we try to say.
Literally true.
The problem is that when you're having a discussion with conservatives like this, like him saying, oh, well, you're upholding the patriarchy, just like talking to some like Christian pastor, like, how the fuck are you going to convince him of the support abortion based on it being, him upholding the patriarchy. I mean, doesn't he fucking believe in the patriarchy exists in the fucking first place? And you're never going to convince him. Like, this guy, it doesn't. Like, what you should be is skewing them on the positions that they do actually hold, which is government intervention, etc., etc. This debate was from last Friday. That's 6 days old.
Okay, wait, calm down. Okay, we're gonna. Oh man, who doesn't love this topic? We're gonna take this slowly. I saw other people wanted to talk as well.
Because their point of view is such that they see that it's an inevitable consequence of theoretically having sex could be getting pregnant, right? If you don't want to have pregnant, you shouldn't be having the sex in the first place. Like, I don't think them seeing it as I think saying that they see it as a punishment of having sex doesn't really encapsulate the point of view that they actually do have, at least in their own minds. Like, maybe it's subconsciously they want to punish women for having sex, right? Because they're puritanical. Maybe that's what they deep down do want to do so, but that's not how they articulate their arguments. They may not even be, cognizant of the fact that that's what they believe. Do you see what I mean? Lots of people can convince themselves of specific positions without even properly, looking, introspectively with regards to what the reason why they hold those positions, right? So even if you counter them by saying, well, this is the rhetoric they're using, they may not even be able to respond on that level. So you got to be really kind of, strategic in the arguments that you do use to defend in these cases. So something like saying, a good argument is what one Kevin did say, which was, well, you can't really outlaw abortion. All you can do is outlaw safe abortion, which the common response is just, well, we don't want to be seen to be permissive of things that are bad. And our position on justice is retributive, and we believe that people who, quote unquote, kill a fetus should be punished for it. Like, I get the axiomatic positions that they hold in these instances. And the difficulty is trying to convince them of why the kind of the big crux of the issue is the idea, like, does the fetus exist in the uterus by right or by privilege? That's kind of where the crux of the argument is, where most progressives would say that it's there by privilege, because the woman, the person who's carrying that fetus permits it to be there and is using their own bodily functions to keep it alive, to incubate it, and they should be able to be given the autonomy with which to sever that connection at any point. I 100% agree with. But if you're of the opinion that it's there by right, and you have a duty as a human to, if you've put yourself into the position of being able to incubate that fetus, you should continuing to do so because then it would die otherwise. And that's a different axiomatic position that they have, and it's completely irreconcilable half the time, which is why I don't particularly like a lot of these abortion debates, because it comes down to some fundamental axioms that people just don't share on like a fundamental level. But that's why I like the violinist argument that Shanala Kerr and Philosophy Tube and Sophie Lewis were saying, because it puts people into the position where, even on the grounds of fetus having a right to life or whatever, you can't really defend it.
Stardust, did you ever get to say what you wanted to say? I'm going to go Stardust.
I'm sorry, Stardust. I don't mean to step all over you.
Well, I find it gross as well, but that's the position these people hold, right? And I can understand why they do, even if I disagree. But I'm just lucky that most people are at least somewhat utilitarian enough to realise that abortion being illegal is just bad, consequentially bad, right? Both over here and in the US.
And we're probably going to go back and forth between Preacher, since everybody is responding to Preacher. I want to make sure he gets to respond to these things. So Stardust, most likely Preacher. Then I think Zerg wanted to say something a while earlier. So Zerg, and I saw Loner. So bring around the Loner.
Okay. All right. So first thing I want to say is I would never say that men don't have a space in this conversation. I think it is important for men to take part in this conversation. But what I would say is that I agree with what Superpower Broadcasting is saying about, yes, when you outlaw abortion in any place, you will see a spike in back alley abortions. It is not hard to figure out how to use a wire coat hanger if you know how the female anatomy works and you know where the amniotic sac is. It's not that hard. And then I would say, you can look at examples of other countries where abortion has been banned. Romania is one of those places, and when because of that, all these women would give their newborns to be adopted or give them to orphanages, and a lot of the time they would find these orphanages filled with children that were neglected. Some of them were chained to their beds. Some of them had not had any affection for those early years of their lives. I mean, I don't ever want to force somebody to live and have to live that kind of life where they have to.
The problem is that, again, you're just not going to convince a conservative with that position, because they will take the point of view as like, it doesn't matter. Them being killed is worse than any kind of grueling life that they could exist within the human realm. which is funnily amusing, because you'd think that if you came from some kind of Christian perspective, you'd think that any aborted fetus immediately go to heaven, which is better than any grueling life they could have. So, like, but again, their kind of virtue ethics position on this is really difficult to get through from a utilitarian perspective.
To be chained in an orphanage in like a prisoner, you know. I'm sorry, it's just when you outlaw abortion, there are so many things societally that are affected by that, whether that is all of these already low income women who have further economic hardship, who choose to stay in violent relationships because they think that they can't raise these children by themselves. They expose their existing children to that violent household. They expose their newborn to that violent household. These are children who grow up with abusive households because of that. There's no way to look at this and not see that this is going to have a detrimental effect on the outer community and society.
Preacher, did you want to respond? Or Dog, if Preacher's fine with that.
Well, I just want to say real quick, to sit there and say that because, and I'm not talking to Stardust, I'm talking to Superpower here, to sit there and say that I'm a man and therefore I have no say in this, you can get off the feminist soapbox on that, because I'm going to tell you right now, what you're essentially saying is that fathers don't matter. Fathers don't count.
Not what he's saying.
Exactly what you're
That's not what I'm saying. That's disingenuous.
Because I'm not the one carrying the baby, I have no say. But listen, it doesn't come down to it's the man or it's the woman. It comes down to the life inside, which is a fetus, a child, and that's what it comes down to. Protection of that life.
So
after you're finished responding to him, can you respond to my points as well?
I guess.
Well, I got a question for Preacher. I got a question for you, Preacher.
Yes.
Given that the abortion is going to happen, whether it's through the coat hanger method in a back alley, and yeah, it's not legal, but whatever, it's going to happen. So that fetus is not making it to birth, or it's legal and it's medically safe and the woman's fine afterwards. Which would you prefer? Because all that stuff about accountability almost seems like you're implying that they deserve it, that they deserve to be punished, right?
That's just asinine for one thing. I would never ever say. I don't say that even about someone who gets shot by the police. Oh, well, they deserve it because they're a criminal. No, nobody deserves to die. Nobody deserves that punishment. But sitting there saying, well, they're going to use a coat hanger instead, is no reason when we could talk about what happens prior to conception. Maybe start having some
everything else.
I'm coming to you. I'm coming to you.
Seriously.
Yeah,
let me
okay,
I just want to make sure Stardust gets a response.
If I can just give, I'll give. I think Superpower Broadcasting maybe didn't word it right. What I can say is that, like, on average, for the average dude who doesn't really give a crap, right? Or I don't know. It just, if we look physically, right, men can spread their seed and kind of like take off, right? Like that's just the reality of the situation. Whereas a woman, when you get pregnant, you have to carry that for however long it takes. So that's I think that's what maybe he was trying to say. I'm not sure if I'm being generous.
I get what you're saying.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so first and foremost, the idea that
yeah, for sure.
The idea that abortion is going to be outright banned across the United States is like further from the truth. If the worst case scenario that Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, realistically, it'd be left to the states to create their own abortion laws. You'd have, now, I'm not saying we can get into a conversation about whether or not it's right or wrong because you have to travel. That's fine. The fact is that you have states like California and New York, for example, who would uphold their own abortion laws, and you've seen how they are. They're going to have their own. Texas will have their own. But, however, I don't see that being the very likely scenario from here. I think the decision we're going to see handed down is that, if anything, that the viability line is going to be drawn down to 15 weeks, if anything. That's the realistic expectation that I'm going to see from the Supreme Court. Is it possible that Roe v. Wade could get overturned? Sure, but I see a lot more questions being tossed around the Supreme Court as to the viability. And to the second note, I keep hearing that men should shouldn't have, well, some saying men shouldn't have a say. I would encourage anybody to look at the 70s and probably one of the most misogynistic times in our country and look at who the Supreme Court was mainly consisted of. Guess what? Old white men, surprisingly. So next time you say men should have a right, the people who made the decision on Roe v. Wade were old men. And probably in the time, at the 70s, were probably one of the more misogynistic areas for men to be in the first place. And they were the ones who sat there and said that the right of the woman is basically should not be up to the state to decide. And it shouldn't be. It should also be held as well, I believe, to the unborn as well. It should be equal. There should be certain respects given in the state's interest to both of these parties, the unborn and the woman. So these are two things to think about. So when we sit here and talk about this, I think that we're talking about way out of the reality of what's going to happen with an outright ban on abortion in the nation. Very far from the truth. If anything, it's going to be down to states, and even that seems farther from the truth than lower on the viability line.
Yeah. Nobody said that it was going to be like a ban altogether. The point is, it's going to be basically a divide between red states and blue states. So you talk about lowering the viability, threshold there, basically down to 15 weeks. The problem with that is, you can have, Roe v. Wade is still intact or whatever. We've just gutted it. We've just completely taken away all of its meaning. Well, that's basically what they're trying to do. It's not just a simple.
Not with the Casey standards.
I do want to engage with Preacher. If it's possible.
Let's let Kevin. I would like Kevin. Kevin was talking and he was interrupted. I just want to make sure Kevin finished his statement. But there's a bunch of people who need to talk. So I want to make sure that they get to speak too because they haven't spoken yet. So Kevin, I'm going to have you finish, and then we have Zerg, Loner, and then we're going to go to Preacher and James.
Okay, thanks, Dylan. Yeah, so just to conclude here, basically, the problem is that we're getting to ranges of time periods now, 15 weeks or less in the future, where some women aren't even aware that they're pregnant necessarily. Down the road is what they're looking at. They're basically they're pushing to move this to a point that eventually you'll have it where you can't even get an abortion once you're aware that you're pregnant. That's the end goal, basically. So we can say, oh, it's not totally overturning Roe v. Wade. It's to declaw Roe v. Wade to the point that if you're in a red state, abortion is for all intents and purposes inaccessible to you. And as I said before, a lot of people in these situations do not have the financial means to just go to a blue state. So yeah, that's my point there. Thanks, Dylan.
Zerk?
Yeah, so I think there's some interesting points were made. Superpower broadcasting, I agree with what you were saying. I think the point I wanted to raise at the time about the rate of abortions, I mean, if you look at the rate of abortions in the US preceding and proceeding the Roe versus Wade decision, there was really no change in the amount of abortions happening. Just the health outcomes of the people involved in those procedures were a lot worse prior to the Roe versus Wade decision. So I think if you're coming out for an argument of pro-life, specifically in the discussion of Roe versus Wade, I'm not sure that makes a big difference. I agree with Doghouse's show interpretation of the likely outcome in that it is more likely that the viability is to be reduced from 24 weeks to 15 weeks. My question is, what is the reasoning for lowering that? I mean, that's what I was trying to get at in my opening statement is, what are your reasons why that should be 15 weeks instead of 24 weeks? And that has to be a pretty good reason to justify taking away those liberties. Preacher, to your point about there should be some accountability for women, I think no one's saying that men can't have a say in the discussion, but to make out like you understand the position of women when it comes to like having sex and getting pregnant and the realities of what that means, all that we're trying to say basically is that you can't have a full understanding of what that's like and the pressures they're facing. And for you to make out like it's about personal responsibility, I think that's just such a naive way of interpreting the situation, specifically in that there's a lot of factors in place that could lead to someone getting pregnant that aren't just outright rape or abuse. You know, there could be drug use, alcohol use, pressure, people being too young, like in a big age gap relationship. There's loads of reasons why someone might find themselves pregnant without fully making a conscious decision to be so. And if you try and outlaw abortion from these people, the data basically just shows that anyone who wanted an abortion and couldn't get one, going to lead to higher rates of pregnancy complications, higher rates of domestic abuse, higher rates of anxiety, depression, lingering health problems after the pregnancy. And these are all factors that affect the children after they're born as well. And ultimately, all you're doing is reinforcing the cycle of poverty that exists for the lower income people that may want access to these abortions in the first place. Just makes things.
And also just makes society worse. Like with the increase in poverty, it means an increase in crime, which makes the streets worse for people who live. Like if you're like a middle class, the reasonably well-off and well-to-do person, you live in a city, right? You don't want your city to be full of crime, full of homeless people. You don't want that, right? Like trying to appeal to conservatives on the grounds of, well, you should want the best for poor people. We already know conservatives do not give a shit about poor people. They do not care at all about the individual poor people affected by this. But if you frame it as making it worse for them specifically, and you play into their own personal, interests or whatever, then I feel like some of them actually start listening to you. When you talk about the homelessness issue, I've talked about that before on stream, where if you just say, well, do you like having homeless people on the streets? No, well, we'll just take them off the streets then. Makes it much easier for them to be palatable than just trying to appeal to them on the idea that maybe everyone should be entitled to a place in which they live, right?
It's worse for everyone.
Okay, Brant, did you want to respond directly to anything you just said?
It's kind of basic. It's basically off the whole vibe here. I wanted to get consensus from the group. If federally we were to take Roe v. Wade and turn it from case law into just a law and say that, in the spirit of compromise, because I think a lot of this is about finding a compromise that both sides of the table can come to and agree on and have continuity. I look at it, if 12 weeks, no fault abortion was legal, and then after 12 weeks, you were subject to, let's say, some type of health panel or a health board for which would weigh your case for sensitive sexual crimes, different things like that, special circumstances. Would everyone here be supportive of that law up to 12 weeks? After 12 weeks, you can't get away with no fault. You'd have to go through a panel or a board that would weigh that circumstance, and those would probably be appointed or elected people within the state. Would y'all support something like that? And that even goes to conservatives or right-leaners on the particular panel. Would you be supportive of something like that? Are you willing to come to the table and compromise in any way that can make both sides?
Wait.
I understand.
Yeah, we're gonna go. Wait. We're gonna go to Loner because he was next on the list. Don't worry, I have everybody's name written down. Loner, Preacher, and James. Don't worry, James. I see you.
Yeah, just because there are two sides of an argument, that doesn't mean you need to compromise. I'm sorry. Like some sides can just be wrong. As for this isn't about just is Roe v. Wade going to be overturned completely? That's not how progress and just rolling back works. It's a process, and as in for even with Roe v. Wade existing right now, then there's still an.
The problem is there was the HuffPost article, which is I don't know how to tell you that you should care about other people, but unfortunately that's just a line in which you find the conservatives find it difficult to be able to actually get onto. But the thing is, they turn it round, right? They try and say that, well, I care about people so much so that I want them to be able to, save themselves on their own, right? This fucking cop-out answer, which is how's that? Does that improve their material conditions at all? No, it fucking doesn't, right? I hate that shit. Christian work ethic nonsense.
issue that in a lot of red states, there's just such a limited amount of abortion clinics that there are already obstacles there. So, Sardis, I think you maybe made a mistake in the very beginning there asking men about whether or not they would actually go through a pregnancy if they could, because you're just asking them if they think they would. You know, they don't know. You can give any answer you want. And just in case you're wondering, Preacher, we mean cis men, trans men can give birth. I didn't know you were going to be like a fucking hallway school monitor with the literal definitions. But yeah, there are lots of analogous studies to this. Like if you have, they've experimented with male contraception that had side effects that were about a third as bad as the contraception they generally give to women, and men refuse to take it. So yeah, I mean, I don't really think it's worth speculating on whether or not men would do like what men are saying they would do when it comes to pregnancy. But I think you're kind of just dodging the question when you say that, well, people will just use back alley abortions. Well, they shouldn't do that. They should have personal responsibility. Well, no, that means you basically like reveal to us that you're not actually for banning abortion. You're just for banning safe abortion. You can't actually ban all the ways people get abortions. And we know what the 70s were like. We know what the measures people went to pre-1970s to abort their children. It's not about what you think should happen. It's about what will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Loner Box basically making arguments for me there. Yeah, like the idea, like this weird fucking idea of compromise, just like the fucking idea that we should have that black people should just compromise with like white supremacists that happen in the US. It's crazy. And then it consumes like the media that we consume as well. There's a really great bit by Rufus Hound where it's like this insane media obsession with balance, rather than just having somebody who comes on who's an expert in a certain topic just come on and go, yeah, that's right. There has to be like this confrontational debate that happens about this issue with two opposing sides of it, right? So, for example, they'll be setting the motion, do we think that it is nutritionally viable to inhale a drain pipe full of bees at breakfast time? And on one side of the BBC discussion, we'll have a professor in Maritas of human dietary nutrition who says, no, you really shouldn't be inhaling a drain pipe full of bees at breakfast. And the other side of the debate, you have your Bedlam's finest, Albert Moonhowler, who thinks that absolutely one should definitely inhale a drain pipe full of bees at breakfast. And people watching that think, well, if it's a discussion, then surely the answer is just somewhere in the middle. So maybe I'll only eat a handful of bees at breakfast rather than inhale a whole drain pipe full. And that's the stupid fucking like way the discourse gets framed, by always turning something into this kind of confrontational debate rather than just having somebody come on who is an expert in a certain field, who has proper credentials and represents the overall opinion of this particular professional community, right?
Is it my turn?
Yep, Preacher, you're next on the list.
All right, first,
dog.
I want to go down.
I got you now.
I want to go down to what Stardust was saying, because Stardust brought up some good stuff, and I agree with you about those situations. And to show that I am actually pro-life, not just pro-birth. I understand that we do have issues within the adoption program, within the foster care program, and they need to be addressed. And I think if we can address them, then that gives that avenue, that alternative. But the problem is, if you look at most abortion clinics, women aren't even offered those options, at least not on the most part. They're not offered the option. They're more pushed towards the abortion than they are towards adoption or anything else like that. I do agree that there are situations where we do need to fix the life after birth for the children. Yes, I agree with that. I just don't agree with terminating children until it's perfect. But hold on, I want to address the other two, and then you can yell at me all you want, I swear. I've been divorced. I'm used to being yelled at. I swear you can yell at me all you want. But I want to say to Brant, I agree with what you're saying. I probably would agree with what you're saying, but I look at it like this, and if somebody said it, well, just because there's two sides to each conversation doesn't mean there has to be any compromise, and that's just it, because the heartbeat bill is compromised. The heartbeat bill is saying, listen, we'll compromise. We don't want to get rid of it completely, but at least have a little bit of humanity at the heartbeat. No, it's like Metallica, kill them all. You can't, it's all or nothing with a lot of the people on the left. And to sit here saying that because I'm saying that people should have more self-accountability means I'm just okay with backyard abortions. No, it's not what it's saying. You guys are like, I'm like not too far from Hershey Park. They have a roller coaster called the Super Duper Looper, which goes like you guys going every which way except for saying, you know what, maybe a little bit of self-accountability. I understand, like you said, drugs get involved, alcohol gets involved. This is self-accountability.
It's not though, because people's circumstances, how they grow up, the world they grow up in, their mental health, all of those imply
forced to get drunk or high?
I know.
Not forced, no, obviously just more likely to do so if they're in worse situations.
Preacher, who forced you to speak English?
Yeah. So the abortion is.
Okay. Wait. Stop. Don't make me mute. I'll mute people.
Oh my God.
Don't stop.
I've got
that loner.
No, we're gonna get muted. Stop it.
That Preacher.
Now I see how you got muted before.
Okay, so Preacher's. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. Okay, so a lot of people wanted to respond and say stuff at once. Who was the first? I actually lost track. Who was the first person to open their mouth?
I'm gonna talk for a minute.
Dog. There's a process here. There's a lot of people. Okay, dog. You gotta quiet down.
First.
Okay.
I get it, Dylan. You haven't seen me.
Okay, dogs needed too, because we're an authoritarian state who hates the righties, okay? So I'm going to go back to the list then, but I'm gonna have Stardust respond first, because I think the Metallica Kill 'Em All statement should get a response. I'll unmute the righties now if they behave. Dog, you're next after James, I promise.
All right. So, what I would say, in response to, I believe that you said that we need to fix the system. Would you be willing to pay more in taxes to fix that system, to provide for the healthcare and for the taking care of children up until the age of 18? Because that's what we're going to have to do.
Very interesting question.
That's
what I
actually
would ask.
that's a tax I would support. That's honestly
Okay,
what I would support.
then, secondly, I would say, would you support the implementation of comprehensive sex education in all schools so that people know how to prevent getting pregnant, people know how to protect themselves, people know how to prevent abuse, prevent rape, prevent themselves from getting pregnant?
Now, maybe this is my ignorance, but I did learn that in school. Our school taught that. So if it's not taught nationwide, then maybe it should be yes.
It's not. It's not. There are areas where it's abstinence only. Abstinence only actually leads to higher rates of teen pregnancy in areas.
I am a minister. I do not push abstinence only. I am not naive. I came to ministry later on. I was a teenager. I know that abstinence only isn't going to work. But I do agree with health classes teaching protection and all the other stuff that you were saying. Maybe not at least the 5th grade level, but
I would teach it earlier than that. I would teach it as early as possible because that's
You
how we
think
prevent
kids that
people
young
from
can
getting
really-
abused. Yes, children get abused at any age, and the only way that
Right.
they know they're being abused is if they get that
I see what
comprehensive
you're
sex
saying.
education. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I'll agree with you on that. I was just saying, like, when it comes to like this, the protection and stuff, I didn't know if children that young could really understand it. But I see what you're saying. Yes. Okay. I agree.
Are you
with
talking
you on
about like full-on biology? Or are you talking about if a stranger approaches you, stranger danger?
Not even about
that's-
strangers. It's not about strangers. The majority of people who abuse you are going to be people in your family. So I
that.
mean,
So they
people
understand
you know.
that this is not
Well, no,
right.
did
So
that-
they
I was
know-
more so like putting a broader term on it.
Okay, but when I say comprehensive sex education, children need to know that their family member touching their genitals is inappropriate, or their family member forcing them to perform oral on them is inappropriate. They need
I
to know
agree.
these kinds of things.
That I agree.
Sure.
With.
So
Okay, so you agree with higher taxes and with earlier comprehensive sex education?
Yeah, I agree that
Oh,
with that tax. But I also agree there's a lot of other taxes we can cut.
And do you we need to bring up. Okay. I don't have any more questions at this.
The things you don't even have to raise taxes on like middle class people to be able to afford like a proper social safety net. Like the taxes in like the social democratic North European countries, like the Nordic countries, isn't much higher than personal income taxes in the US, for example. They just have sovereign wealth funds funded by public institutions and SOEs, right? That they use to generate, governmental revenue with which to fund these programs, which they usually don't get in the US because everything is just so privatized. Obviously, we have less of that in the UK as well. There are very few SOEs left. Obviously, the big one is NatWest and the Bank of England, but hey, it is what it is.
At this point.
I have a question if that's all right.
Yeah, we better get the doghouse before he explodes.
I had a bunch of other points, a bunch of other arguments ago. So now we're at this point. I think I'm going to go with the sole argument that if you consume 14 minutes of this entire first hour spouting the words personal responsibility, and women should just think about what they're doing, and you never once even solely side reference the responsibility of men in the process of making babies, your argument is pretty much trash. That's the only word I'm going to get in edgewise, so I'll just leave it there.
Well, that was directed pretty solidly at Preacher. Preacher, do you want to respond to that?
Directly.
Doghouse, I'll be real quick, I promise. I'm glad that's the only word you're going to get in edgewise, because your arguments are trash. Just because I didn't speak about men doesn't mean there isn't a point where men are responsible. Obviously, men are responsible.
It just never occurred to you to mention it.
But men aren't the ones having the abortion. So we were talking about the abortion. If you want to talk about the men's part, I can have a whole discussion on that, because dudes are dogs. Good guys in relationships have a shit time dealing in a relationship because the woman's been treated like crap by so many other guys. Yeah, guys are freaking dogs. Guys are pigs. I know that. And somebody else said it. Maybe it'll start us, but the guys are.
That's the issue, right? Is that the even conservatives will take a position that's just like, yeah, no, it's fine. Men are bad. I'm like, no, not intrinsically. There's nothing inherently bad about what men do or don't do. They're shaped by societal expectations and the structure in which that they live in. And it's not something that's like being a fucking dickhead. It's not innate to men and masculinity. Innate to men and masculinity. That's not something that is going to be part of the male culture and masculine culture forever. Men have the capability of not being like that. And if we just change the culture and the society that surrounds it, then we wouldn't have to deal with it. And we allowed men to not have to conform to an incredibly rigid notions of masculinity, which I'm assuming he doesn't really think about because he doesn't sound like he's very feminist, really, to be honest. So
Go around the fantasy. I know that. I agree with that. I'm not saying that guys are totally excusable here. Hell no, they're totally responsible too.
I literally had to mention it before you even conceded that men were part of the process of women magically getting pregnant.
Because we were talking about the abortion part.
How do you think they get to needing the abortion?
Oh my gosh.
Look, guys, I think we've already established that Preacher is pro-comprehensive sex ed, early comprehensive sex ed, and pro-raising taxes. I think we have created a feminist here, so I mean.
So, okay, Doghouse.
I have all love and respect for women. I don't know that.
Doghouse is next, and Doghouse, you know, I gotta use the bathroom, so please follow them.
Can you mute Doghouse while you're gone?
No, don't you do that. Thank you. So I'm going to reel this back to the Supreme Court for just a second to address the conversation that happened like 30 minutes ago in response to superpower broadcasting and the idea of the lowering of the line. This was brought up in the Supreme Court case that just happened with Mississippi in the oral arguments. I believe it was Sotomayor who asked the Center for Reproductive Rights about, so life changes after 15, and they got into a conversation, and then Center for Reproductive Rights mentioned if we end up implementing this viability line and lowering it, then it'll inevitably, like you said, states would race to the bottom. Justice Roberts said the issue at hand is the 15 weeks viability line. They're not worried right now about the 6, the 2, the 3. That could get brought up later. Right now, their main concern is that Mississippi's law specifically states 15 weeks. So could it happen? Sure. Will it go to the Supreme Court? Very likely. So right now, the issue at hand primarily is 15 weeks. In fact, Roe v. Wade and and here's the thing too to keep in mind is that all these arguments are going to get stacked with precedent. So things that I don't think that just because Roe v. Wade maybe gets overturned, I doubt it. I think that what you're going to see is the more that these rulings come out, the stronger, in my opinion, that it may come down to that you're not going to get an outright ban on abortion because all of these justices are going to have a say in what this actual case is. And the justices do look at these abortions and they held, and matter of fact, what we're having this conversation right now, they are scared to death. They're like, we don't want this to be a political thing. And Kavanaugh, who ironically, a lot of them are asking, Sotomayor, Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, she was asking, look, how do we make sure that this doesn't get viewed as political? We don't want to overturn Roe v. Wade in this hot political time because it can be viewed as political, and they want to make sure the courts try to stay apolitical as possible.
So to respond to that, basically, what that means, though, you can extrapolate from this and say, well, if they're doing this and lowering here, then that's going to set new precedent. You can understand how, in terms of precedent, you can say, oh, we're just going to laser focus on this. But no, we can look at the bigger picture. And so this is why I make this point right now, which is that just as in foreign policy, when Putin takes Crimea in eastern Ukraine, he doesn't end there. And if we give him that, that's just appeasement. Likewise,
you would have to come out at some point.
Weeks, they're going to keep moving. So if you appease people, they take an inch. You appease them again, they take a mile. And where do we wind up? We wind up in a fascist world.
Cases down the line. Each of those cases are going to be different cases that are going to be handled at
And it's also I just hate this like appeal to constitutionality, and it's just like, well, the Constitution, they have this opinion that just the Constitution itself is somehow infallible. I'm like, well, no, I don't give a shit. I don't give a fucking shit about the Constitution. I want me to make a normative claim about what you think is good or not about the legality of abortion and the judgment that's been made. Or you can say, well, it's like this point of view of, well, it's the judgments, so I agree with it because of the Constitution. It's just you like grounding your axioms using someone else's words rather than thinking for yourself because you're an idiot, right? What, like, make an ethical judgment on whether abortion legality is good or not based upon some kind of moral framework that you've got, not just saying Constitution good, judge ruling within Constitution also good, trust the process, right? This is such an asinine argument for somebody to make.
That's
going to have this precedent on its side to push for
but
more.
The lower you go down, right? I understand what you're saying.
So
but
why
what I'm telling you is,
why not resist now? Why not resist now?
I'm saying that to worry about something at 3 weeks or 6 weeks when that's not the case at hand right this very minute. Right now, the case that's important is this one right here with Mississippi at 15 weeks, and that's the conversation we should be having. Do I think it should be 15? From all the things I listened to and heard, I don't think I quite understood the reason that I went down 15. I don't even know really. I think the 24 weeks is because it's the end of the first trimester, which is what the Roe v. Wade initially had held.
It started viability.
The second trimester, yeah. And so I believe that's why like that 24 weeks is set. I think that 15 seems a little bit arbitrary. I don't understand why.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? That's the point.
They're trying to bring it to zero. They're trying to bring it to zero.
You just said it yourself, that's so even we can say then, like, even if this is just like if it's just 15 or if it's just heartbeat as if that's a compromise, well no, but we can attack that on its own merits completely because it's the same thing. It's trying to reduce the number of abortions based on an arbitrary opinion on where the fetus becomes a human life. And I guess, Preacher, if you're saying the heartbeat bill, let's have some humanity, otherwise kill them all. So I'm guessing you would say that once there's a beating heart, then if you abort that, you're taking a human life. Is that what you think? Just a yes or no. Preacher, you're muted.
Yes.
That's taking a human life.
Yes.
What should the penalty be for that?
Well, I'm not sure what the penalty should be.
Why? Should it be the same as if you murdered like an adult?
I mean, many states it still is that if you were to kill a pregnant woman or injure a pregnant woman and her baby dies, then yes, it's the same.
Yeah, because you're deciding for that pregnant woman whether or not the child dies. That's kind of different. That's her choice, not yours.
Yeah, but it's two charges.
For having an abortion, yeah, I know, because the pregnant woman would have the choice, not the person who murdered her. That's very different. I'm asking about having an abortion.
With the murder of the baby.
Okay. I'm asking because I don't think there's any states where having an abortion carries the same penalty as murder, does it?
I don't think there's any around.
No, there isn't.
Do you think it should?
I don't know if it should be.
Why would you struggle to answer that if you're taking a life? It's killing them all. If it's not having humanity, why are you struggling to make that decision?
Because maybe
it's the same
situation as someone. Go ahead, Brant.
Okay.
Every state has different
after Brant, by the way, Star.
So close.
Yeah, that's why. And I want to know what the difference is. If you're saying it's a human.
Loaderbox is just like so unfathomably smart. Like, and he's so good at thinking on his feet and then just like putting things into words to just corner people. His videos are just like, they're so good at putting points across. I've learned so much from watching his stuff. Highly recommend him.
Life, and if it's like we're saying kill them all by aborting them.
Brent, no, I said after you would star. You can, no, stop. Brent, you can go on. I said after you would star.
Well, I was going to say every state, like for instance, what's going on with all these court cases that have been nationally publicized, the definition of murder, the definition of self-defense, all of these things are arbitrarily reinterpreted 50 times. 50 different states have different statute for what murder is. So when you're talking about abortion, you're talking about, and see, like I said, personally in my household, we're pro-life. I would consider that murder. But at the same time, if another state says that they'll allow that, at that point, by the state's terms, it's not really deemed in a legal stance as murder. So it really depends on what state that you're in, what they designate as intentional or indirect homicide. And then that would better answer the question that you posed to Preacher about, well, how would you punish a person for...
So if a different state made murder legal, would you be happy with that?
If a different state... Well, I mean, I'm an anarchist, so I wouldn't worry about
if
what
Texas
the laws
made murder legal, would you be like, oh, well, it's okay?
Oh, yeah, I would fucking hate it. Yeah, duty as a constituent if I feel as though my rights are being infringed.
Okay, well, not Texas then, some other state, sorry.
According to the Constitution, they can't.
Yeah, well, exactly, but according to Roe versus Wade, right, that's a federal law, not the Constitution, but you're trying to roll back.
It's not a federal. Well, I mean, yeah, let's say it's not.
Okay.
So
I'm not denying that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to drag it over to Star. They've been waiting very patiently.
Thank you. So I do have several questions here. Let me know if they become too much at any time. So I just want to respond to one point earlier. Somebody had asked if I would compromise on the abortion thing. No, never. Sorry, not going to do it. After everything I've listed, as far as the likelihood to experience economic hardship, the maternal bonding, exposure to violence in the home, domestic violence, all of these things, there's no compromise for me. The societal effects of that are way too much for me to ever consider compromising on that. But I did have some questions to ask. One of them is, I expect that several people here believe that life begins at conception. I would ask what happens to eggs that are fertilized but don't implant in the womb, because about apparently between 1/3 and 1/2 of all fertilized eggs never fully implant. Are those just babies that die? And if so, why are we not doing more to prevent those from dying?
Just to expand on that point, if you look at the miscarriage rate, it's about 1 in 4. So there's 3.75 million births in the US every year. That means there's about 1.25 million miscarriages.
I'm asking a question, bro.
Yeah, but I'm saying it would be the highest cause of death in the United States by a long, long while.
I'm asking a question. Somebody please answer me.
It sounds like it just sounds. I mean, I'm not. It sounds to me like that's a miscarriage, and that would how we would.
It's not a miscarriage. It's not a miscarriage. So between it's specifically an egg that does not implant. This does not even get to the part of being. It's a fertilized egg, but it does not implant. It is not a miscarriage because it never implanted. It never implanted.
I can answer that question,
is that a dead
please,
baby? Don't answer it for me. I want one of them to answer for me. Okay.
No, can I answer for them?
That's just an ejected embryo that never fused, is what that is.
So it's not a dead
because
child.
The reason why it's not a child yet is because naturally it wouldn't have grown. The path at which it takes, not fusing, it would not have grown into a human. It needs fusion.
Holy shit, you guys, you fucking right-wingers are so bad at defending your position.
Whoa. First off, no, let me address that.
You're right-winging. Okay, look,
no, instantly, every time, just because I have my own personal beliefs. A lot of people just go, oh, he's just some hard right-winger. I catch flack all...
For sure. But, like, both, again, I think both sides of the discussion just have incredibly axiomatic beliefs on these that it's very difficult to convince them otherwise of, which forms a very, large part of the discussion at hand. And it's incredibly irreconcilable for a lot of these things.
Day, the fact that I am at least 1 to 2 feet left of almost every right winger that is a part of my community, and we can agree to disagree on things. So get that straight.
I was speaking very general. I was just saying you guys aren't really. This is a really easy question to answer.
Thank you. I don't understand. Loner box.
I don't understand. Okay. We're quieting down. We're gonna have a Doghouse respond to that. It seems he wants to respond as well. Yeah, because what I'm trying to understand is the logic behind this, and even conflating this to abortion. It seems like these are two totally different situations. I mean, I'm not saying that it's tragic. I'm confused on why we're using this topic in abortion. So if you could provide clarity on that, because it seems like two different situations.
Sure. The reason why is because if you believe that life begins at conception, and you believe that aborting is murder, then the fertilized egg not implanting in the womb is also post-conception, but also murder. Right.
Wait. Hold on. Wait.
Please let me answer this question.
No, wait. If an egg were to be fertilized, right? Are you saying that the murder is the egg dying? Because that seems like what your definition of murder is the fact that the egg is
the egg being washed out naturally from the woman's body. Yeah.
You think that's murder? No. I don't think that's what the murder is.
I mean, that's what I'm asking. Is that murder?
No, I don't think that's a murder.
There's a complete and total difference between a natural dying of the egg and an intentional taking of the fetus.
You'd be criminalizing women that maybe have,
I mean, there's a complete and total. You can't even put them in the same. That's like saying, well, someone passed away of natural causes. Well, they must have been friggin' murdered then.
I mean, why are we doing more for that then instead of focusing on
Well, I'm
abortion?
sure they are.
I mean, yes, they are. they do suck.
We've got what,
But that's not the
1/3,
topic
one
of
half
tonight.
of all these souls being, dying? Why are we not doing more for that?
Maybe they are. I don't know. We were talking about abortion tonight, not that. So I didn't do research on that.
I mean, I think yes, it is a testament. There's a testament. That's what he is saying. That he basically is admitting that the ideas do suck.
Of what I interpret, I guess my type of abortion is interrupting the natural organic process that would have naturally occurred with a human being, fully conceived, crowned, birthed, cut the umbilical cord, all of that. If the fertilized egg is not even fusing, that has nothing to do with an inorganic situation that naturally organically happened to you, and it's tragic. It's a terrible thing. I know a lot of people that suffer with that particular problem. Namely, I didn't really want to bring it up, but in my household, me and my girlfriend, we will have to consult with a doctor if we want to have. We will have to inorganically force a fusion if we want that to happen. So,
wait, are you saying that there actually are studies and stuff being done for that?
I wouldn't even listen.
Well, is birth control like murder then?
The chain of sequences just don't even match. Like the idea behind Kataya and what Brent was saying, there's a totally line of different sequences. And then second to that, your premise is that I don't know many people. Maybe there are people. I'm sure there are people out there who believe that abortion is straight up murder and that the woman should be charged. First of all, murder is I believe, a legal definition, and something like that I don't believe. Even in Roe v. Wade, I could be wrong. I'm willing to be wrong, but I believe in Roe v. Wade they didn't make the woman technically criminally culpable. They made the doctor. Now I understand that what the implications are. I'm just saying though that I don't think there's very many people who would say that the woman who gets the abortion should be convicted of murder in any circumstance. So I don't understand in this situation if they go get an abortion. So I would even just say that these two things between an accidental.
I'll bring it closer. Okay, I'll kind of close it up. Birth control and like the morning after pill are things that help.
Yeah, it completely leads to nothingness. Like, remember there was a great bit on Charlie Brooker show I was watching, and he was talking about how someone was on saying, well, the idea that something's natural being good is such a nonsense thing. Like, I think that cars are, and trains are useful and they're not very natural at all. Whereas I think that syphilis pretty bad, but also very natural. Like it's
prevent the egg from implanting, right?
Correct.
So is it by that definition?
I'm firmly.
Or for a minute, it kills our swimmers. Yeah, for sure.
I will inject this into this because I've said I disagree with Luder that when there's a situation like this, and there's two sides of the story, there should be compromise. Do I want to see it happen? No, but make it compromise. Sure.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, if that is the case, then is that abortion?
Contraception?
Yeah.
Do you want the people on the right to make compromise, or just say no? You know what? No more. None of it.
I mean, look here. I'm going to play devil's advocate against the right here too.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that have separated me from the right as far as this classical conservatism thing, where it's like completely from start to finish, and then you start seeing people move the goalposts, like you're talking.
Yeah, you wear glasses. Have you not considered that your bad eyesight is natural, fucker?
Now all of a sudden, just because it's the pastor's daughter or somebody's particular family member, and they're within a prominent family, now all of a sudden we move the goalposts from being a life is a life to we took Plan B. We didn't go get an abortion. We went and got a Plan B. So I would have to say that the goalpost has slowed. I would, and I don't want anybody here to take this the wrong way. I would say that in the last bit that conservatives have been forced to be the more being somebody who's watching as a third party from the sidelines. I've seen the conservatives been more to progressivism and the left pushing more to what you would call regressivism. And I see conservatives trying to come to the table, which the left uses an argument all the time of, now you're you said a life was a life, and now you're. What are you talking about?
It seems like I don't understand how this is related to my question.
You're talking about contraception. Yeah, moving the goalposts.
About murder.
How's that? How is
your definition of miscarriage is a murder.
I'm asking if an egg, if you prevent an egg from implanting,
I'll let this go a little bit more before I give it to Loner.
Well, what I've been trying to say is clearly it's between you as a constituent and what your county and state and federally how it's voted in. If we get enough justice in there and they turn it over, that's going to be a reflection of what the constituency is right now. If the left is not willing to even come to the table and start talking about a way that we can etch something into law that also protects the other party that's involved in this, then we're always going to be standing here in a Discord called 9 Deep arguing about Roe v. Wade and where we should start at as a goalpost. If you're not willing to come to the table and compromise, that's where I'm literally seeing conservatives, like you're saying, Loner Box, kind of go back on what they've traditionally had as their goalpost. It used to be something where you didn't even.
I understand that this is a hard question to answer. So I guess I could ask you about stealthing, right? What do you guys think about stealthing? Should a man still be required? So here's the thing: if with this abortion law, right? If a woman says that she's on birth control, but she's not really, and she gets pregnant by a man, should that man still be required to provide for that child financially all 18 years of its life?
Holy shit! This is like wait. Can you provide an example? Like any kind of
yes.
What are we talking about? Mississippi state? Like we're getting into like legal stuff. Do you know a state that this would apply to? Are you talking about Mississippi? I mean,
every time she asks you guys a question, you're like saying, well, people would vote on it and then they would go through the state. Like we're asking you to make moral claims. We're asking you to justify your positions.
No. She said should. It sounded to me like she was making a legal claim, not a moral claim. It was
yes, it is a moral claim. It's a moral claim.
Should the father be responsible?
If a woman gives birth, right? If a woman, let's say this, okay? If a woman is raped, right? And abortion is no longer legal, right? Some people would say she should carry that, right? If a man is a victim of stealthing, which I personally consider that equivalent to rape, I would ask you, would you want him to be still financially responsible for that child, even though he did not ask for that child?
Absolutely not, because you're not agreeing to that circumstance, right? That's ultimately
civil liability.
The crime of rape. The crime of rape would be an isolated instance from litigation on the custody of the child. And
I was gonna
wait,
and I was gonna say no. Okay, if you want me to give a straight answer, I will say, with no other context, I wouldn't think just off the top of my head that no, the father should be responsible. But again, here you're saying, oh, it's a moral claim, but what you're talking about is literally civil liability. You're not talking about a moral claim here. You're talking about civil liability. Okay, fine.
It can be civil, but I'm asking
no, it is civil. You're saying, should the father be financially responsible? How does that go through? That goes through the courts, which is a civil liability case, and you have to have a whole bunch of facts to determine.
Do you think that he should be responsible? Do you think?
Well, this is turning into a mess now, isn't it?
That he should be responsible?
Well, can I add a caveat? Is the husband or whoever the person is who has been disenfranchised, whichever parent has been disenfranchised, are they making a claim to be in the child's life and be a parent outside of the circumstances? That would be in my eyes, when arbitrating something like that, that would be a major factor. And if the father wants to be in the person's life, the incident of ghosting, choosing to have and conceive and make the child, not conceive, but birth the child, let me correct myself here, and then after having the child, if that person wants to be in their life, can make a legal claim, I think that they should be able to. I mean, obviously the judge is going to have special custody instructions, seeing as how all of this came from trickery. So I mean, that's the way I would argue.
The reason why I'm asking this is because a woman is held to be responsible, held to carry that child for all of those 9 months, and a lot of the time she will continue to take care of that child afterwards. Even with the option of adoption is not a good option most of the time.
Are you working under the premise of a zero abortion state, or are we talking under a premise of having a 15-week viability line? Because right now, realistically, what we are working with right now, we can argue, like me and Superpower were talking about. We could talk about future down the road of a potential of this going further and further down, but right now in the current state that it is in, we are talking about a possibility of a 15-week viability line. So are we talking
thinking
zero
too legally about this? I'm
asking you a hypothetical question.
I'm asking you a hypothetical. Yeah.
This is silly as hypothetical.
What he's alluding to is if you're forced
to answer, just say you can't answer. Just say you don't know. Just say it's fine.
Yeah, you can have an opinion on a legal matter on a
no,
moral
because this
basis.
is the problem. Listen, I don't give a fuck anymore. I'm just going to talk about it because I'm tired of every time we have an abortion conversation, we always rush to the extremes. On either one, we can talk about rush to the extreme of 15 to 0. We can rush to the extreme of 0 weeks.
I understand this is very
and then we
upsetting
rush
for
to
you,
the extremes of
but
rape,
people-
in which case most people would probably agree that 0 weeks is probably not the best. Most people would probably agree that
don't need to yell. I understand you. I understand.
Okay. We're slowing this down. We're pausing this for a second. Okay.
Are you? You sound a little upset now.
Guys,
right now.
please stop. Okay. Loner has been waiting extremely patiently because he wanted to comment a very long time ago, and I let this go on for a little bit, so I want to make sure Loner gets to put his 2 cents in. And Brant, I can't tell if you're raising your hand or what you're doing.
No, I wasn't. I was moving this. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, my bad.
Loner?
Can I make a suggestion real quick? Because I noticed the two people who waited the longest have dark backgrounds. Maybe if they have a little bit more light, we could see them a little bit easier.
But I also have a dark background, so is it biased?
Yeah, but you're not raising your hand.
True. Loner?
No, but you have matching purple, so you're good, Dylan.
Yeah, so I mean, Douglas, what's kind of just happened for the last, 10, 15 minutes is that she asked you a question about what you think ought to happen, and you just kept on asking about, no, you didn't. You didn't know because it's
I said no, a father should not be financially responsible. Rewind the clip. I said no.
Okay, it took you a while. Okay, yeah, fine.
No, you can rewind the clip. I said
okay,
no.
I believe you. Okay, thanks. It just took a really long time. Yeah, because
I know, you're not listening.
so the question with the egg implant was basically just that if life begins at conception, then if a woman uses contraception to stop the egg from implanting after it's been fertilized, would that be the same as ending a life? Because technically that egg has been fertilized. And I think the reason you don't really want to answer that question is because you know that this whole thing about whether it's a heartbeat, whether or not it's the egg being fertilized, whether or not it's the egg implanting after it's been fertilized, these are all arbitrary. Which is why every time I ask you if taking a life, which you call it, should be treated like murder, you fucking shrivel up and go into this little cocoon because you know it's not the same. Because it's not the same as murder.
Wait, why? Okay, what is your definition of murder?
Oh my god, it reminds me of the debate moment about abortion that fucking Charlie Kirk had with this Jewish comedian, I think it was, and he was fucking destroyed. He was hilarious. He picked up he could put a picture and said of a fetus and say, "You believe this is an actual human life worth preserving at the expense of any woman?" And Charlie Kirk's like, "Yes, 100% believe I do." And then the other guy goes, "Well, this is a dolphin fetus. You're a fucking idiot." It's very, very funny.
Okay, I don't care. I'm gonna answer anyways.
That was a question for me, but go ahead.
The unlawful taking of a life. What?
I'll have Dog,
by
Preacher, and then
someone,
Stardust had another
or-
question, so we'll bring it around her.
The unlawful taking the life of a person.
No, like in other words, does someone enable that action, or is it just in and of itself spontaneously? It just ends a life. It's murder. Like, is there another action?
There has to be, which is why you guys took so long to answer the thing with the egg implanting, because it's about intent, right? Someone has to do it. Yeah, obviously, not just if you die of natural causes, it's not murder. Okay.
Well, no, but
make your
Stardust
point.
was implying that with the whole egg being fertilized. She literally implied that with the murder situation.
Yeah, but that's why you could have just said intent. But that's the thing. Contraception is intentionally stopping taking contraception is intentionally stopping the egg from implanting. Therefore, a fertilized egg from implanting.
I jump in
I'm
here
not
real quick
opposed
because
I myself am not opposed to an early
Doesn't have a heartbeat.
The sad part is that Charlie's genuinely really quite erudite. He's very cogent with the positions that he holds and the arguments that he makes. He's just like an absolute fucking monster.
Embryo stage.
Yeah, like I'm not. You also have to ask where I'm okay with, like, because at this point, like, if you're talking about like someone that's gotten impregnated within a week or two, if I'm okay with that fetus being aborted, I'm fine with that. So you should probably also ask that premise too, because honestly, I don't give a shit if someone takes a birth control and that egg implants and it passes by natural causes or because of the abortion pill or because of the contraceptive.
Okay, then the question wasn't for you.
Yeah, that was the question for
the question wasn't for you.
Taking a life.
Wait.
Preacher.
Here's where the confusion is coming from. You have one side who has literally said absolutely no compromise. Our side, am I happy about it? No, but I'm willing to compromise. That's where all the confusion is coming from. Is that you guys have no compromise? So, Preacher, you're moving I'm not moving my goalpost. I'm compromising. I'm saying, listen, I'm not happy about it. I would rather this not happen. But if you take the morning after pill, at least you've done that before the heartbeat. I'm not happy about it, but it's a compromise I'm willing to make. The heartbeat pill, a compromise I'm willing to make because you know what? Maybe we do want to have some safe abortions out there, right? I guess if what we're saying because we think I don't, I do. If they're going to do it, it should be safe. So, you know what? Let's make a compromise. The heartbeat pill. No, that's not enough. That's not enough. We want them whenever we want, wherever we want, how many as we want. You guys aren't willing to compromise, so we're never going to see eye to eye. It's going to be nothing but confusion and bad faith argument.
I'm sorry, I'm not compromising on my own body. I'm not.
Like where you probably wouldn't even know that you were pregnant in the fucking first place.
It's not your body. It's not your body.
It is.
No,
It's attached to me.
I think your complete lack of ability to make a coherent argument is very exemplified by you appealing to compromise every single time. Like there doesn't need to just be a compromise every time there are two opposing opinions.
We brought about a life, yes, there does.
You're talking about autocratic rule now?
Keep in mind, life starts at conception, but there can also be an argument about viability, which viability means that the ability for it to exist outside of the womb. So there could be an instance where, like, for example, Preacher or even me, maybe, that believes that life begins at contraception, but that that life may not be viable outside of the womb, for example, right? So this is the biggest question: is that when it comes down to an abortion or prescribing a legal argument for this, is where do you believe that viability line should be? And as a compromise.
That's why I quite like the Sophie Lewis argument as well, because she fully admits, say, yeah, it's killing. It's 100% is killing, but it's a killing that we have to be able to defend because you shouldn't be forced to, essentially, you be an incubator for somebody against your will. Like, they're there by privilege, and you can kill them at any point, in the same way as in the violinist example.
Is I think to kind of piggyback off a Preacher, I would say that as a compromise, sure. Like I said before, I don't care if you take the morning after pill and everything else because it's probably not viable at that point. I don't know if there's any scientific studies that shows that an embryo at 1 week or 2 days or an hour, which was mentioned in Roe v. Wade, by the way, I don't think it's viable outside the womb. So I don't mind that.
Okay, wait. Okay, Star had one more question. I want to make sure we got this question out. I want to make sure we can bring it over to Preacher so he can respond. Zerg raised his hand a while ago, or Nick. So I'll bring it over to him as well.
Okay, so you going to me first, or
well, it was going to be Star, Preacher, then you.
Okay.
I was. I'm sorry. Chad is making really funny jokes. No, I was just making a joke earlier. It's not my body. It's the state's body. It's our body now. We're communists now. No, I'm just kidding. Right. The other question that I had was, do you guys agree then if this abortion is no if you had, I guess, these restrictions on abortion, would you agree then that men who provide the sperm for that have to pay all living costs for the mother and child above the poverty line if the woman has had the child independent from relationship status? Or would you prefer the state to pay for it?
Is it okay if I give two answers?
Sure.
Okay, so if abortion is illegal and it is completely, let's say, 0 weeks, it's completely outlawed, then the person probably would be liable. If abortion was legal, and which changes up the choice, gives you more of a choice of having the child, then I would be privy to then, at least giving the other party, the male, the option to either be in the child's life or sign away custody rights. But I don't know if I would just much rather, or if I would just say, hey, you're just on the hog for 18 years. I don't know if I could do that.
Right. So here's the thing about that. I understand what you're saying, that men should be able to have a paper abortion, which I agree with. But in the case that abortion is no longer no longer an option for women, a lot of women will not feel confident in putting that child up for adoption, just because knowing how the adoption system works in America. Therefore, I think it's fair that if a woman decides to even though she didn't want that child, take care of that child, not put it in the adoption system. I think it's fair that we have a way for these women who are below the poverty line to be able to support themselves and their child. So I would say that the man who provided the sperm to make that child would have to either support that woman and that child for the next 18 years, regardless if he's involved or not, or we raise the taxes and we have the state provide it.
Well, it's actually, other than in cases like you were talking about stealth before, which I'm sure is very few, but in any other case, like there's a group at the most county courthouse called domestic relations where women will go and file for child support, where that man is indebted the child support till the child's 18 or 21 if they go to college. I fully agree with that. If a man creates a child and doesn't either be in the home with the mother and raise that child together, or if for some reason you guys don't get along, which obviously happens, then hell yeah, he should, and he should be able to be a part of that child's life, and hell yeah, he should be supporting that child. There's no reason why.
Holy fucking shit! I never even thought of that position that a lot of conservatives will hold. It's just like if you someone like a real life human in your house or whatever, you can just fucking shoot them dead. But if you have somebody sapping your, like literally being parasitically draining your life force, I guess not your life force, like parasitically draining your resources and you're physically incubating for 9 months, ejecting them from that is somehow murder. Like, it's crazy.
I can't stand that. No, yeah, no.
Would that be considered socially conservative, forcing in a way, at least economically, that I guess monetarily
it would not be. That would. I feel like that would be more forcing somebody to pay for a child and another person who they are not directly involved with for the next 18 years or 21 years is not really a conservative thing. It's not really a thing that a lot of conservatives.
No, it is pretty conservative. No, it is pretty conservative.
Financially, I don't know. I don't know about that.
No, it is pretty conservative. No, it is pretty conservative because you're implying there that
conservative, but financially, no, not really.
No, it is because you're implying then that men are expected to be the breadwinners, and so therefore they have to pay. That's an old school understanding of financial relations.
Yeah, and self accountability.
I would say though that seems like a great idea, though. To be honest, I think like that's a pretty damn good idea. Fleshing it out the specifics, I would want to, in a way, look at that. But if the man wanted to opt out and the woman was able to gain sole custody and the man would not be in the child's life at all,
he shouldn't be allowed to opt out.
Oh,
if we are going to ban all abortion, then he should not be allowed to opt out.
I agree with
you.
He's not
allowed to opt out.
And I'll tell you right now, I'm in Pennsylvania. A man cannot opt out, and in order for a mother to have his rights removed, I know our county judge, as I know specific cases, will insist that she be in a relationship and that person she's in a relationship is willing to adopt. That and I mean I agree with that, but no, I don't think a man should be able to opt out. If you create a life,
I just have to ask a question, Stardust. Do you know?
Then after this, we gotta go to Zurich.
Can you name anybody on this panel who's advocated for a zero flat out no abortion ban? Can you name anybody on this panel who's advocated for that? I'm just
no, but that's what the ideal is, right?
Oh, okay. Well, right now, specifically, we're talking about Roe v. Wade, and I believe
I think you're just upset because I'm asking questions.
No, you're proposing silly hypotheticals, and nobody's proposing. Nobody.
Questions for you. It's okay.
Hey, why are you pivoting? Why are you pivoting? Can you name who on this panel has advocated for zero?
Nobody on this panel. But
so then why are you posing a hypothetical? What's the point of this hypothetical if no one supports zero?
If you don't want to participate in it, you don't have to participate in it. That's okay. It's fine.
Maybe it's better to ask. Preacher, what do you believe that line should be?
Okay.
Like the whole point that Stardust is making here is that, like, from the kind of axiomatic points these people are making about where they think that where they think a life starts, they think it starts at conception. So you think of the human, you think that a human life is created as soon as it's conceived in the uterus. So killing it would therefore be murder. Therefore, if we're going to be talking about where the right to life starts, you have by their own logic, it has to start at conception based off the arguments they've given already. So to be able to have abortion in the position where it becomes murder because you're killing a life, it has to be right at the start. So the only possible legal framework which backs up the moral framework that they are proposing is a blanket ban on abortion from 0 weeks. Right? That's the only conclusion that they can come to with the positions that they hold. And Stardust rightly points this out with the hypothetical that she's proposing.
So
I will make the commitment to the heartbeat bill.
Okay, but you said that was a compromise, right? You don't actually want that.
I said 10 to 12 weeks. 10 to 12 weeks.
This is a compromise. Let's say that we don't compromise.
Okay. Pause this for a moment. Pause for a moment. I do want to hear Preacher expand upon that, and then we have to go to Zurich. He's been waiting very patiently.
You guys got to listen for one moment. Take your ideology out of it, because I said it was a compromise. I didn't mean it was me specifically making that compromise. I'm saying the conservative right has made that compromise, whereas the liberal left will not make any compromise. That's what I would say. I say me specifically. I went to Washington D.C. and I laid my dick on the table. I said, "This is what my compromise is going to be." That's not what I said. It has nothing to do with me.
Nick.
Okay, it's quite a lot been said, but I think just to maybe pull it back a little bit towards Roe versus Wade and what we're talking about here. I mean, everyone's talking about compromise, but I'm English, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the decision made in the original Roe versus Wade case was a compromise between the potential future life of the fetus and the bodily autonomy of the woman. And with scientific advisors helping them, the court came to the decision that the point of viability should be where the line is, i.e. at 24 weeks. That's when they felt like the right to life of the fetus outweighed the bodily autonomy of the woman, that already is a compromise. That's, serious people making a serious, well thought out decision to point the line.
Now, I believe that a reasonable line to draw is viability, right? I think that's reasonable viability because, you can still essentially, you can still sever your connection to it, right? You can still essentially give up on the act of being pregnant, of the gestational work that you have to mete out to be able to incubate that body, right? You can still opt out of that whilst also preserving the life of the fetus as well. That's why I think viability is the crucial line, and that's why I would take that position. Whereas in any other position, right, there is no way of you being able to do anything with that fetus other than kill it to be able to, for the woman or the person bearing the child to opt out of the gestational work that she's having to go through in incubating the child, or they are rather, in incubating the child, right? So that's why I think that having the limits to actual abortion being viability outside of the womb. I mean, if you can somehow, like, I don't know, have some kind of system in which you can induce early birth in people who want abortions after that time, that'll make it easier. But then, like, whether you want to give that up for adoption or whatever is up to you.
And at that point, so you can argue back and forth about whether abortion is morally wrong or morally right. If you want my opinion, I think to try and abolish abortions completely is barbaric and honestly would set the United States back a great, great deal in the eyes of pretty much every other Western country in the world. But I've yet to hear a strong argument about specifically Roe versus Wade. Even from you, Doghouse Show, like, you kind of reference it a lot. Why should the line be brought back to 15 weeks? There's no argument for that. It's just, I feel like it should.
Yeah.
I believe it should. It's my religion. Why?
I'll be fair. I'll be honest with you. I don't see or have heard so far an argument as to why it should be 15. To be fair and to be completely honest, I think 24, admittedly, as I've said, is that the 15 does seem to be a bit arbitrary. I don't. As a matter of fact, Sotomayor asked this specifically to Mississippi, the Solicitor General. She asked, "What scientific changes have happened between Roe v. Wade and this new bill? Have there been any scientific advancements?" And this is where the whole idea was brought up about the fetal pain and things like that. And this is where the infamous Sotomayor thing came out about the thing. But I'm not going to get that. The point is that I don't think I've heard anything quite that has suggested that I should move back to 15. I think 24 seems a little bit more solid. I think if you look at viability in terms of like studies and stuff like that, it looks like there's a greater chance for a fetus to survive outside the womb at 24 and 22. The question though is, obviously, as medical advancements do go through, because inevitably we're going to have medical advancements, then is that viability going to get pulled back? It should get pulled back, in my opinion, based on medical, not based on some philosophical or religious perspective. It should be based on something that's actually strong and founded. It should not be based on something that's just like, I feel like 15 weeks this week, or I feel like 12 weeks. It should be something that's founded at least in some sort of reason, besides philosophical.
Well, it's just to sort of go back on, I think we all know the reason why the Conservatives want to move it back to 15 weeks is that's the first step in moving it further back towards 10 weeks, 5 weeks, eventually 0 weeks. That's what they want. They might make out like they're just going to get 15, but it is arbitrary.
And I'm gonna throw you a bone. I'm gonna throw you a bone on this one. I'll steel man you a bit. In fact, they did. I think it's Sotomayor.
Does anyone think this guy on the top right sounds like Ringo Starr? Like, all I think of is him like narrating the Thomas the Tank Engine.
Again, I could be wrong, but I think it was Sotomayor who actually mentioned this, saying that isn't it interesting that when this new Mississippi law came in place, that you, the state, mentioned that you all are implementing this law because there's a new conservative majority in the Supreme Court. So it is important to note that, to steel man your argument, that maybe this is a very, very well motivated movement. And I'm not going to say that it's not, because I don't think, again, I'm willing to hear more arguments out as to why it should be lowered to 15, but so far from the first oral arguments we have heard from the Mississippi case, it doesn't seem like it makes much sense as to why it's lowering it down to 15, other than maybe fetal pain. So that's one of the things.
Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Don. So I just want to kind of touch on something that Greenzer mentioned, but in general, a note to the social conservatives here is that, like it or not, here's the thing: in the long run game, you were basically kind of asking, well, where's the compromise from the liberals on this issue? There's no need and there's no moral grounds to compromise here, because as has been mentioned, Roe v. Wade is the compromise, like it or not. Because here's the thing: if you do undermine Roe v. Wade and this 15 weeks is set, I guarantee you Democrats are going to win huge in the midterms, and for potentially a decade, you'll just have Democratic presidents come in. And the thing is, it's going to basically completely undermine the GOP. People are going to be completely disgusted. You're going to eventually have the court come back around to a Democratic majority. And coupled with that, the culture war is already a futile battle for conservatives. So you can get a couple tactical wins here or there, like this case, for example, if this goes through. But in the long run, over the next 500,000, 1,500, 2,000 years, religion's gone. Everybody's liberal. Like, this is a lost cause for you guys. So if you...
Even then, just like having abortions not being like a political football anymore is like electoral poison for the GOP. So many people get like fervently behind the GOP specifically because they want it to ban abortion, because they think that they might do in the future, and it's part of this kind of this like cultural battleground. If that battleground goes, they're just gonna get fucking like disillusioned with, or not disillusioned, they're just gonna opt out of the political process because they've got their thing. Like they've done what they wanted. It's like the Brexit people who just like stopped engaging once Brexit happened.
If you're smart, what you would do is you would accept Roe v. Wade as the as basically the non-politicized compromise. Because when you push stuff like this, well, it can come back around and bite you, and you might have the lead for 20 years or whatnot. It's a tactical pushback, but the long-run trend in the culture war is obviously going to favor us. And
no, literally no one ever debates abortion. No one ever debates abortion in the UK. That everyone's completely settled on it. There's like extremely fringe conservative Christians who oppose abortion, but literally there is nothing close to a movement outside of some random people holding placards on the street about abortion. Like they're an tiny minority who get constantly mocked and ridiculed.
Conservatives in 100 years are going to view Roe v. Wade as too little.
And I'm gonna steelman you a little bit again. I'm on a steelman spree. I would also argue people who think that this is going to be a conservative win. This is a big risk. People don't understand that if this doesn't get upheld and they all dissent upon this and they're like, no, we don't want this. That's a huge precedent, and this will be almost up to the equivalent of Casey. People have to understand that this is actually a pretty big moment to where this could easily backfire on conservatives. If they say, no, we don't agree with this 15 line, then that's going to be an uphill battle for any other conservative case that tries to move up to the Supreme Court, especially with the young conservative majority that we have. So keep this in mind that this isn't like some small risk. This is a huge risk on both sides. It can either go really well or really bad for conservatives, not only politically, but also judicially.
Yeah, it is pretty nice. But we have like the big trans debate that's kind of a little bit slightly less lacking over in the United States. So.
Like this can fuck conservatives in any kind of abortion case moving forward if they all dissent on this and say, no, we're not going to decrease the viability line. They're going to have years before they're able to decrease it at all, if anything.
Yeah, no, massively. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but you're right. Like theoretically speaking, if two of them just say no, you know, it may Coney Barrett says yes, but the other two say no. Well, then they're fucked. They're totally fucked because now you had every circumstance. Even had Mississippi saying, yeah, we're making that play right now, and they get screwed over by the Supreme Court with a 6-3. It's GG's for the so-called pro-lifers at that point, right? Like good luck, ever. Okay. Like for hundreds of years ever. So.
Okay, Preacher wanted to say something quick, and then I'm probably going to look at wrapping this topic up because we've been going on this one for a while now. Preacher?
Yeah, I'm going to be very quick. I don't want anybody to think that I think politicians, even right-wing conservative politicians, they don't give a crap about any of it. To them, it's votes. They see the abortion debate as votes. I'm not fooled by it. I don't want anybody to think I'm like, oh, this politician, he's on my... No, he's not on my side. He's on his own side. He wants his votes. He wants his pockets lined. And that's the right also. I don't want anybody to think I'm under any fantastical belief that the politicians are these great people that just are so moral and ready to just raise the Bible for everybody. No, absolutely not.
Okay, is that everybody? Wonderful. Okay, we're going to do wrap-ups then. Stardust, you raise your hand. Would you like to do it first?
Sorry, I'm always muted. Yeah, sure. Like I said earlier, there are a wide variety of reasons why banning abortion is a bad idea and why I will never compromise on this. It's just bad societally. I would ask you, what is going to be the greater impact on families in general in society when we willingly expose more children and more mothers to violence in the home? What is going to be the broader impact societally when we expose all of these families to financial hardship? I would ask, what is going to be the broader impact societally when we have all these mothers who can't bond with their children? I would again also ask you guys to take a look at Romania and their banning abortion. Pretty bad. I guess just ponder upon whether you want to have the ability to have a paper abortion. So yeah.
Okay, next is gonna be Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. So I managed to make basically almost every point I wanted tonight. So it's been a good discussion. And again, I want to reiterate here, I don't believe that there's, compromise for the sake of compromise. No, some things you don't compromise on. Roe v. Wade is the compromise, and anything less than that is ultimately appeasement. And as we've seen from history, appeasing reactionaries simply means that they will take more ground, and appease them again, and they'll take far more ground. So appeasement doesn't work. No appeasement, no compromise. Conservatives here on this particular issue would be lucky to accept Roe v. Wade as the long-run status quo compromise, because down the road, the decades, the centuries going forward, Roe v. Wade will look far too conservative. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, next is going to be Doghouse.
Yeah, so got a little spicy there for a minute. Kind of went like an uphill and downhill. I will admit that I didn't give too much moral prescription there, but I will say I did towards the end, and I do want to say I think
that's why this discussion was so fucking stupid from Doghouse. It was just like everyone knew that this is a moral issue. We're asking about whether a law is good or not. We want you to give a moral prescription. And you just didn't fucking do it. It's such a fucking slime ball.
Very important. We should have all established this at the very beginning, because it seems like that a lot of the conservatives were willing to give a viability line at least as to where we'll draw the line on abortion. But it doesn't seem like I heard too much from the others on the panel as to where that line should be drawn. I'm willing to say that as medical advancements continue, inevitably they will, maybe that line should be drawn down. I think that the courts have been weaponized. They've been weaponized for a while. But I think that Roe v. Wade has been grossly perverted in the way that it was originally written. A lot of people took it as an open book to abortion when that wasn't entirely the case after I dove into it. I'm not going to go into all the nitty gritty of it, but look into it. It's very interesting. They basically say that the woman and the child, unborn child basically have essentially equal rights up to a certain point. Well, even then up until I think like the third trimester. But anyways, I digress. The point is that these conversations tend to go in circles. And this is why I was trying to kept drawing it into Roe v. Wade, because all too often we get in these conversations when it comes to abortion or Roe v. Wade or anything that comes up with the new abortion law, it always gets the same conversations, the same hypotheticals every time. And it's very important that honestly these conversations should start off with, where do you stand on the abortion line? That helps everybody work within the same framework. It helps everybody stay away from the crazy hypotheticals of a zero flat-out abortion when nobody believes that, because then you're leaving people who honestly want a maybe 24-week and less, or 24-week or more abortion ban. You're leaving them to defend a 0-week abortion ban. Where does that make sense? I'm not going to defend something that I don't even defend. It's silly. So that's why I don't believe in these hypotheticals. But anyways, again, I think there's compromise to be had. I do agree to some degree that Roe v. Wade was sort of that compromise. This Mississippi law that is going on right now could backfire huge on Republicans. We'll see how that, or conservatives, we'll see how that goes. So far, I'm leaning to be inclined that they may lower it. Again, we'll see how that affects in the coming years, but that's where I'll wrap it up for myself.
Okay, next is going to be Preacher.
Yeah, I do agree that Roe v. Wade was a compromise at the time, but we have come quite a ways medically since then, and I do believe that is why we're seeing challenges now. Oh, excuse me. I tried to get most of my points out. I do regret that I did not get to the talking about the lifelong depression that women suffer after having abortions. Not all, but many of them do. But I stand my ground on what I believe in. Like I said, compromises have been made, but it is what it is. Nobody else wants to compromise, I guess, so we'll leave it at that.
Okay, Loner?
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy to compromise when there's like an argument made, but if the argument is just compromise, then that's not a reason. Like if someone tomorrow wanted to ban cooming because they're concerned for the massive sperm genocide, then and they said, well, let's compromise and meet in the middle on abortion, I'd be like, no, that's like, we're not going to compromise just for its own sake. And you know that, like, I think, yeah, Preacher, you didn't say that you wanted like a total flat out ban on abortions, but you said like you and plenty of conservatives do, and your compromise is the heartbeat. Well, I don't even know if I really try. Like I know, like they know that's a cop out. Like they're just saying compromise with us and meet in the middle over something which, you know, Dog, you said yourself, the 15-week is arbitrary. There's no medical justification for it. Same with the heartbeat bill. There's not really a justification for that either. It's another arbitrary one. And I don't really know how comfortable I am compromising with the kind of people who they themselves, if that's what they're trying to do, that means that they're compromising with people who they think are killing babies. So it's like, I don't know, Bay of Mills.
James?
Oh, sorry, I didn't even hear you. Lot of ground covered, most of which did not involve me, blessedly. I'm sorry, you know, we're gonna do the whole call it like it is thing. I'm sorry, I know people who say that they're pro-life rather than pro-fetus or pro-forced birth do so because, you know, it's a virtue signal throwaway and it still provides cover. It's not an argument I buy. It's not an argument I believe. Roe v. Wade, you know, if you want to speak just legally and judicially, Roe v. Wade was the compromise, and then you can just put a period on the end of that sentence and stop saying 12 more sentences after it, because that's the compromise. And just because I'm an even player and I like going scorched earth on both sides of the field, this is the point of the show where I remind everybody that a little while back during Obama's first term, the Democrats had a supermajority all across the board, and if they were really that concerned with a woman's right to choose, they would have made it a law or a constitutional amendment. But rather than doing that, they used all their political capital on forcing people to buy private health insurance or else get fined and go to jail. The Democrats are no more concerned about abortion than the Republicans are. They're just concerned about it being in play as a subject that they can use as fear to bring people out to the polls. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Obama. We're going to throw it over to Nick.
All right, I'm just going to kind of reiterate what I was already saying. I've not heard any good arguments as to why the line should be brought down from 24 weeks. If an argument could be that at the point at which viability is possible with new medical advancements is earlier, then maybe you could make that argument to move it down. I would feel a lot more comfortable moving that down if the United States had some sort of socialized healthcare, so that if someone were to be more easily able to find out that they are pregnant by getting, you know, easy pregnancy test, and more free to make a decision to get an abortion at an early stage rather than having to save up money for a procedure that they can't afford, which might take them past the new point that you've drawn the line at. So yeah, introduce socialized healthcare, and then maybe I'd be a bit more comfortable bringing the line down if it's accompanied by advances in medical, viability.
Wonderful. We're going to throw it now over to Brant.
Yeah, so Roe v. Wade, I don't think it was a compromise. I think it was an established landmark case law precedent. It was not voted in by the House and then passed with the Senate and then signed. It was not a law that was amended. It is purely an example which has been established as precedent. And the compromise, which the conservatives are now coming back in Texas and having done the heartbeat bill, that was their... I
mean, it is true that Democrats just continually are also using abortion like a political football to bring people out to the polls, and it's despicable that they do that. But then the GOP is even worse because they're also doing that, but also on the side of the bit that's immoral, right? And like James, I think James is completely correct. The Democrats should just have gone, right, that's the law now, bye, let's go. And then if they want to get a supermajority elsewhere, then some might be able to overturn that. But but they don't care enough about protecting it to want to not use it as a bargaining chip for voters moving forward.
You could call it a counteroffer. In a way, you could call it a counteroffer. I think that's kind of a cop out for what it really is. It's just a strategy on all out, especially if you're a classic conservative, banning abortion. But what I'm saying is that is their compromise. The compromise, let's get it correct. The compromise was not Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was a specific case which established precedent for which now is being used as the basis to argue for either its dismissal or establishing it through compromise into a law, sliding it into the sleeve of a law. So that I personally would compromise 12 weeks, and that's federally. And I don't even like the federal government, but that would be my.
Well, that is true. I mean, the GOP using it as a point is awful. But I mean, like somebody who kind of cynically supports it as a voting tool is not as bad as somebody who opposes it like monstrously as a political tool, right?
Compromise as an individualist.
Wonderful. Now I'm going to do something different right now. It's for.
Okay, well, that's the end of that debate, which was, as usual, on every single debate that ever happens on these fucking panel shows, the Conservatives showing themselves up as not being able to either make prescriptive arguments because they know that their prescriptive arguments have no proper moral basis behind them, and then also, so they basically spend their entire time spinning their tires on policy and talking about bullshit like compromise, rather than actually having a discussion about the moral prescriptions that they're making with the positions that they hold and the things that they say. So it wasn't never productive having these conversations, but I needed some content to watch, so I watched some hippy dippy. Anyway, it is now 1:45 a.m. in the UK. I'm very tired. I'm gonna get up at 4 a.m. to watch The Ashes as well. So I'm gonna, as much as I have, more viewers than I usually would, I'm gonna end the stream there. I will raid Kevolution if I can find him. Oh no, I'll raid me some Malcolm. Malcolm is a cool people. So let me start the raid. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next one. No, the start looks good. Discussion is always good. Like, I'd much rather actually have a discussion rather than just me opining over what I want to do or over what I want to talk about for the entire time. Otherwise, I get kind of, I find it, I find it difficult to just continually just talking myself over and over again. Thank you very much for follow, Aviator Gamer. I only just caught you on the back end of the stream, but hopefully I'll catch you on the next one. Like, just me rambling and talking is incredibly difficult to keep up for a very long time. Whereas having a conversation with somebody, I can do forever, right? It's different. Then I've got a jumping off point to be able to have future ideas. Whereas if it's just me just talking into a camera for 4 hours, I would never be able to keep it up and having enough information and point of view to be able to continue that. So the dialogue is always appreciated. Yeah, it's not a problem here, sir. Sir Evane. My vein? I don't know. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it's much appreciated. I'll hopefully catch you on the next one and enjoy you guys